Zoning Board of Adjustment, Monday, June 28th, 2021. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Zoning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on December 10th, 2020, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on December 29th, 2020, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on December 29th, 2020, said notice was posted in the office of the Zoning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching their decision, and a decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For any members of the public wishing to ask questions or comments on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature when the chairman opens the hearing up to members of the public. Once you are brought into the meeting, you will need to have both audio and video. You will be sworn in and required to give your name and address. Please note you will be brought into the session one at a time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you're, excuse me, one other thing, if you're calling in, you need to do *9 to raise your hand, *9 to lower your hand, and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Mr. Tropoli, you mind swearing in the professionals, please?
Professionals, raise your right hand and swear the testimony you give this evening be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Right, the record should reflect that Ms. Beam, Mr. Aguiar, Mr. Cunliffe, and Ms. Spiro have all been sworn.
Don't forget me, Ron.
Mr. Howard, too.
Oh, and Mr. Howard,
Okay.
all
Thank you.
noted.
Roll call, Eileen?
Yes.
I didn't have the minute or the
No problem.
agenda up. Roll call?
Sure. Mr. Cantor?
Sure.
Mr. Hughes has been excused. Mr. Mertens?
Here.
Mr. Moretti is excused. Mr. Orozco?
Here.
Mr. Saya?
Here.
Mr. Stanton? I have not seen Mr. Stanton. Mr. Gonzalez is excused. And Chairman Nansen,
Here.
you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Can all please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
Republic for which it stands,
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible, liberty,
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Approval of minutes, regular meeting, May 24th, 2021. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Saya, Gonzalez, and Nansen. I do not have video or anybody up because I'm having to read from the computer here. So,
The chairman, I make a motion to move it.
motion by Mr. Saya,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Mertens or Mr. Cantor.
Mertens.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, vouchers,
I have no vouchers this evening.
correspondence.
I have no correspondence this evening.
Okay, we do have a case that's on the agenda that's gonna be rescheduled, correct?
Yes, but they never did their notice. That's
Right.
why they're being rescheduled. But if you want to make the announcement, it's case number BA 2111, Walter Miller. He's going to be rescheduled and renoticed.
Okay. It's, anyone in the audience for case number BA 2111, Walter Miller? This case will be renoticed and we'll have another scheduled date for it. Okay. Okay. Resolutions, case number BA 2103, Diamond Communications LLC, New Singular Wireless PCS LLC, AT&T, Cellco Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless. Resolution granting conditional use variance, bulk variance, preliminary and final major site plan. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Sayed, Nansen. Do I have a motion?
Chairman, I'll vote to move it.
Motion by Mr. Sayed. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Cantor.
Seconded by Mr. Cantor. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Mertens?
Yes.
Mr. Saya?
Yes.
And Chairman Nansen.
Yes,
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
thank you. Case number BA 2106, Ofco LLC, resolution granting use variance with bulk variance approval. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, Orozco, Sayed, Nansen. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Merton,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Sayed. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Mertens?
Yes.
Mr. Orozco?
Yes.
Mr. Saya?
Yes.
And Chairman Nansen.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Resolutions memorialized.
Okay, case number BA 1823, Home Sweet Home Daycare Center, Inc. Resolution grant and use variance. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Orozco, Saya, and Gonzalez. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'll vote to move it.
Okay, motion by Mr. Saya. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded
Mr.
by
Orozco.
Mr. Roscoe. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Mertens?
Yes.
Mr. Orozco?
Yes.
And Mr. Saya.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, applications before the board. Case number BA 2107, 366 Ramtown Greenville Road LLC. Use variance. Application of 366 Ramtown Greenville Road LLC is applicant and owner seeking a use variance approval. Bifurcated application to construct a 20,088 square foot warehouse within a wooded portion of the rear of the site and a 1,614 square foot loading breezeway to connect the existing building. They are also proposing to utilize the existing 17,485 square foot one-story masonry building as a warehouse, 14,443 square foot in office space, 3,402 square foot removal of existing site driveway, relocate approximately 150 easterly so that it is no longer within the 150-foot wetland buffer on the site, as well as parking and 3 bio-detention basins on premises known as Block 3, Lot 29, 366 Ramtown, Greenville Road. This application was originally scheduled to be heard January 25th, 2021, when it was carried to April 12th, 2021, with no further notice. On April 12th, 2021, the application was carried to May 10th, 2021, with no further notice. After testimony May 10th, 2021, the application was carried to June 28th with no further notice. Expiration date August 31st, 2021. Eligible voters, Cantor, Mertens, Moretti, Saya, Gonzalez, and Nansen. Before we move forward, Mr. Pate, Eileen, do we have any further certifications on this?
Mr. Orozco, have you watched the video or read the transcript of this hearing?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Orozco is eligible.
Okay. Everybody else here is eligible.
Yeah, but you're missing Mr. Gonzalez tonight, so you actually have 5 members tonight that are eligible to vote.
Correct. Okay, Mr. Pate,
Yes.
I'm gonna leave that up to you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for pointing that out. So, and I thank you for having Mr. Orozco place on the record that he has listened to or watched the video. I would respectfully ask that the appropriate certification be added to the file so that it is in the file. This evening, we are prepared to present 2 additional witnesses to the board. With a 5-member board, I am not comfortable asking the board to vote. So it is clear that we will not conclude this evening. I thought before we started, knowing that this is not going to conclude, I would turn to you, Mr. Chairman, to state, is it your, knowing we're not concluding, do you wish to hear the 2 witnesses first, or do you wish to allow the public an opportunity to participate? I have no objection to either procedure and defer to you.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Tropoli here.
Good evening, Mr. Pape.
Good evening, sir.
I think the better way of moving forward would be for you to conclude your case. It would be cleaner, and this way we wouldn't have to reopen it again to the public. So with that in mind, again, just by way of an approximate time frame, how long do you believe each witness would take?
On direct, Mr. Tropoli, I would imagine that Mr. Ray's testimony on direct will be somewhere between 25 and 45 minutes, depending on the nature of examination from the board and the board's professionals. And Christine Caffone's testimony to be in a similar range. I would anticipate that most often Ms. Caffone testifies without interruption, and then her examination is at the end. So somewhere in that range for those 2. And I do have a couple of procedural matters to discuss with the board before we start.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I think we should move through the entire direct case with Mr. Pape this evening and then open it to the public.
Okay, Mr. Pape,
Yes.
would you mind giving to the board just a brief summary of the previous testimony or where we're at today? Would it bring everybody up to snuff here?
Yes, I would be pleased to do that. A brief summary before the meetings conclude and before there's a vote. I will reserve the right to make a thorough summary as part of our summation. But for this evening, this is an application requesting use variance relief to expand an existing warehouse building. The existing warehouse building is owned by your applicant. It is occupied by your applicant. The business that they run from this building is the business that they are seeking permission to expand. The property, they've owned the property since 2018. And there is an expansion of approximately 20,000 square feet proposed, which is a substantial reduction from that which was originally proposed, which when the first application was for over 30,000 square feet. The applicant has presented testimony from the engineer and from the environmental scientist and from the architect. Those are the professional witnesses who testified. And a representative of the family, Stephen Stefanski, testified with regard to operations. A very brief summary is that this property was developed initially, we found from aerial photographs, in 1960. It has had very little in the way of improvements since that time. There is no environmental protection, no stormwater protection. There's little, if any, pavement on the property. And the landscape plan is not a planned plan. It's just what grew up. The property has a number of environmental encroachments, all which were documented by Dr. Walker, all of which the applicant has made a commitment to remove. The applicant has agreed to replant areas that were environmentally sensitive areas that were disturbed. And when we concluded, we had presented a fairly comprehensive plan prepared by Charles Sermonte. We indicated it was a use variance, and not a site plan, and that in order for it to be a site plan, there was considerable additional engineering required. We presented a summary of the environmental cleanup that the applicant has identified and all the permits that the applicant has secured. And we presented Steve Radosti's testimony, which was, to demonstrate that the building that had not been given the benefit of any tender loving care for a very long time would be completely redone in a very attractive and professional manner. Mr. Stefanski talked about his family business, talked about the history of the Stefanskis being in this business going back to the 1950s, and that the three brothers who are currently operating it are looking forward to using this property in an improved state for the business that is already there. I think that summarizes, Mr. Chair, where we left off. We did leave with some questions asked by the chair and the board, and I thought I would address those. Is that an acceptable summary for purposes of this evening?
Board members, that acceptable? That bring you up pretty much to speed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Pate.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that opportunity. It was some 6 weeks ago that we were before you.
Yes.
One of the questions that was raised for the applicant to address was the history of this property and the prior uses of this property. And we did some considerable research. We did 3 things. With the assistance of Collier Associates, the environmental team working, we were able to secure an aerial photograph history of this property from 1931 all the way up to 2017. And 2017, very similar to what is there now. But it was very, and all of those materials were provided to the board as a supplemental submission. We also did a title search to determine prior owners to see how many times title had changed. And then your fire chief, Robert Lewis, was invaluable because he had, going back not to 1960, but to 1996, from the time that he began keeping records, he provided us with a list of every business that had come and gone at the site. And when I asked how he did that, he said these were the businesses that had CCOs and fire inspections. But all of that packet is in your files. But a very simple summary is that the building that we're looking at first shows up on aerial photographs in 1960. And in fact, the building in 1960 appears to be a little bit larger than the one that exists today. That's just my interpretation of the photographs. And that there has been little, if any, changes to the physical plant. The photos, each and every one of the photos from 1960 to 69 to 70 to 74, 84, 95, 2006, 2010, 2013, and 2017 all show the same industrial building on the property and show that pretty much the same area of that had been cleared. The businesses that had been cataloged by Fire Chief Lewis, and I just have the names, but the names are I think are indicative of the type of businesses that were there. And Fire Chief Lewis's list of businesses include Plastic Retail Corporation of New Jersey. They left in 96. Gemco Plumbing and Heating left in 2006. All Wood Swing Set left in 2006. Jeff's Custom Woodworking, 2009. Center for Cause Awareness, 2012. Auctioneers and Appraisers, 2013. Business Publishing Company, 1996 to 2016.
So Mr. Pape, so there was multiple tenants in this building at the same time?
It appears to me that there were as many as 6 tenants in this building at one time. I mean, it's very hard to recreate all that time period, but looking at the times that Fire Chief Lewis indicated they exited, it appears that there's as many as 6 at one time.
Okay.
And the Green Power Developers, they left in 2016. S&M Leather left in 2016. Precision Door Service left in 2017. Plastic Mill left in 2018.
Okay, now when did your client purchase this in 2018?
Our client purchased it in 2018, and shortly thereafter, he secured his certificate of occupancy and started moving all of these other tenants out to the point where he became the only tenant in the building. So, Bargains 11 Trading moved out in 2018. Howell Heating and Cooling moved out in 2019. DCR Enterprises moved out last year, and High Tech Design moved out last year. So quite a list of what appears to be commercial operations from the property. And the transfers of title are not as revealing. Our clients purchased it in 2018, and the people that they purchased it had owned it since 1997. And it appears that they were the publishing company. The name of the last owner was Urban Publishing, Inc. Mr. Fire Chief Lewis opined that he was pretty sure that it was a calendar publishing company that was operating there all those years. So, Mr. Chairman, in response to your request, we did do the research that was available to us. The aerial photographs certainly give a clear picture. The fire chief's list of tenants that came and went, I think, also give a clear picture. The changes in title were minimal, but it appears that the publishing company was in place for about 21 years before selling it. Our client secured, prior to entering, he secured a change of tenant ownership certificate. It was issued October 22nd, 2018, over the signature of Paul Orlando, construction official. And that certificate states that this serves notice that based on a general inspection of the visible parts of the building, there are no imminent hazards and the building is approved for continued occupancy as per the township's ordinances. So our client enjoys a certificate of occupancy for his business at the site. And all of that information was provided to the township. And the certificate of occupancy is actually a township record.
Right. At this time, Mr. Howard, are you still on? Hi, Matt. Can you give us a little bit of background on the CO? How many tenants were CO'd there?
So I started employment here in 2016. The site wasn't really on our radar until sometime in 2017. That was when the whole property was owned by Urban Publishing. We went there and we noticed just about every tenant that was there did not have proper CCOs. So we started a kind of a cleanup administratively, found at the time, I believe it was 5 tenants. When we started enforcing CCOs, we found a few that did not meet any type of use that was had any history there. So it was kind of a time of change where some tenants were leaving, some were coming. The 6 tenants, I don't argue with that total number at all as being occupying the space. Since that time, we have approved several uses. Almost all have fit into the warehouse and storage type use. About 2018, Mr. Pape, you can correct me if I'm wrong, ownership changed, and that was when Fishing Line came in, and I believe no new tenants came after that, and then they've been slowly taking over more and more of the building as tenants have left.
Okay. Now, as far as the use, was this ever a warehouse distribution use?
every tenant that I've placed via CCO, and the vast majority of the history has been a warehouse storage use.
What about distribution?
Warehouse distribution is treated as the same use in
Mhm.
the code book because it is warehouse/distribution. I've never really differentiated the two on this site, never really had to. Every occupant has been storing goods, and that comes with some movement of those goods.
Okay, any professionals, y'all have any questions? Charlie, Jen?
None from me.
Not at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Howard.
I'm still here if you need me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Pape?
Yes, thank you. Before we begin the testimony of John Ray, I was hoping that we could have Mr. Charles Samonte put up what was originally called, I think, Exhibit 16, and then was relabeled 20. Just if, and I think that I would ask if Mr. Howard could put that up. That's the general rendered site plan, just to do a 3-minute refresher on the site. So Mr. Samonte has been sworn and his credentials made part of the record as a professional engineer. I will ask to recall him and ask if Mr. Howard could put up that rendered site plan.
Ken, I don't see him. Is he here?
As any is, I think he's with.
Any is here, but I can put it up if you give me 1 minute.
Okay. Annie, can you open your camera, and is Chet with you?
This one we want, I'm sorry. Oh.
You'll have to unmute yourself, Annie. I believe that Mr. Samonte is with Annie.
I'm not good. There we go. Can
Thank
you see that?
Perfectly. Let me just,
I don't know if that's us or them.
yeah. There is, has Annie been, it would be say ENNY, has he been admitted?
Yes, he has.
Okay, Annie, if you can hear, please put on the camera and the microphone so that we can have Chet testify.
Eileen, can you just re-clarify what exhibit this is for the record, so we know?
This was A16, but I believe they've made changes and I remarked it as A20. It is an updated site rendering
Thank you.
in color.
All right, I'm going to send a text to Annie. There seems to be a problem.
Ken, I keep requesting that any unmute himself, which is all I can do, but he's not responding.
Yeah.
So I have no video or audio for him.
Figure out what you want, and then
You might have to log off and come back in.
All right, Annie is on now.
Annie, are you on?
Yeah, but he's not unmuted. You got to unmute yourself, Annie.
There you go.
There you go. Perfect.
Very good. And Annie, is Mr. Samonte with you?
Yes, he's here.
Okay.
He's
Annie,
on.
I'm not seeing you. Are you on the video?
Is Chet on his own computer?
Yeah.
Do you have a Chet Sermonti?
Let me just check it out.
You gotta go to gallery view or something, maybe? No, the next to last one. Where is the?
Okay, until we figure that out, I'll join you over here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
So Mr. Samonte, you've previously been sworn and your credentials have been made part of the record as a professional engineer.
Yes,
The exhibit that is before the board is an exhibit that was presented to the board on May 10th. I'm going to ask if you could just do a very brief once around the property, identifying one, where the environmental constraints are located. Very briefly, the board has heard all this. Two, indicating the landscapes, the general landscape plan that is offered. And three, a simple overall description of the stormwater management system that has been offered.
Okay, there are, still there? Okay, there are a few environmental constraints. I guess we could start with the freshwater wetlands. God, this audio is awful. There's freshwater wetlands associated with the site. There is a buffer associated with that freshwater wetlands, and that buffer limit is designated by a dark green line. I don't know, can someone control this?
Can you, that one?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Is that me or is that somebody else?
That's us.
Oh, you're doing great. That is the buffer limit, the transition area limit associated with the freshwater wetlands. And as you can see, there are some existing activities taking place within that transition area, mainly the access driveway coming in off of Ramtown Greenville Road, and secondarily a storage yard to the right of that driveway. Right in there is a cleared, fenced-in storage yard. So those improvements exist within the transition area. There's also a flood hazard line associated with Muddy Ford Brook. Again, you've identified it in red. And also there is a 300-foot riparian buffer associated with Muddy Ford Brook. That's the line in pink, correct, as you're indicating right there. As you can see, the existing access drive and a portion of the existing parking area is within that 300-foot riparian buffer. So the improvements proposed, the lighter tan building right there is the existing building, which is to remain, except for a small portion along the back side of it. There's a little out portion of that building that's proposed to be removed. And then the darker brown represents the proposed expansion of the building. The driveway is being relocated as far upland as logistically possible to effectively access the site. Obviously, we're unable to get it clearly out of the riparian buffer because the riparian buffer reaches our property limit, but we've moved the driveway, again, as I've stated, about as far as logistically possible to access the site. We do have 3 basins proposed for the site. Each one is located to pick up a limited amount of parking lot area in accordance with the most recently adopted stormwater management regs. Again, up front to the left of the proposed access drive is a bioretention basin. And then there are 2 more in the back there. They're identified with the blue shading. Yeah, right there. We do have a loading area proposed between the existing and the proposed building. And we do have a fire access drive located to the rear of the proposed building. Ken, did you want to?
Yes, no, I've just heard a couple of quick questions for the board. I made a statement that there is no stormwater management on the site at all today. An accurate statement?
That is an accurate statement.
And I made a statement that the all of the environmental impositions that are on this property will be removed. And I note the exception is the driveway, which cannot be fully removed, but all other environmental encroachments will be removed as part of this plan.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And we had been asked to make a commitment on the record that there will be a full buffer around the building and that the farmland buffer will be 100% compliant. I know that there's a tiny triangle of the existing building that encroaches into that farm buffer. If you
Yes.
could point to, it's the other end of it's the front, it's
Yep.
that, right?
Right
It's
there.
that tiny, and there's a substantial increase into the buffer that is the crosshatched portion of the building that the applicant has directed you to remove from the building, correct?
Correct again. Yes.
So an accurate statement that but for that very small triangle of the existing building, the farmland buffer and all of the buffer requirements of the township have been incorporated into this plan and will be in any final site plan presented to the board if we proceed that far.
An accurate statement. Yes, Mr. Peck.
Okay. I thank you very, very much for assisting us in that. I'm going to call it a refresher. And Mr. Chair, I'm now prepared to move to the testimony of Mr. Ray with your permission.
Okay, Mr. Pate, real quick, one quick question as far as that tiny corner or little sliver
Yeah.
in the farmland buffer.
Yeah.
Did that predate Howell Township's farmland buffer?
Mr. Chairman, I can't testify to that, but I can, as you have the aerial photographs that go back to 1960, that portion of the building has been there since 1960. So
Okay.
I opine that it did.
Okay.
I also
That
opine,
answers my question.
I also opine that the bump out that we are removing is also of that age, but our client recognizes that it is a substantial encroachment, and he has indicated on the record he will remove it so
Right.
that it's not a violation.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
And Ken, if I could just clarify for the board too, so there is another encroachment into the buffer. The new building does have the new sanitary lateral. The applicant talked about how that was co-located in a location of the existing lateral for the existing structure on the site. And that's the most, from your perspective and your engineer's perspective, that's the most logical location to connect to sanitary sewer because it's only available along the easterly property line. Right? There's nothing along the property frontage. That's the most feasible location to connect to sewer for that new building.
Mr. Cunliffe, you're right. I thank you. There is below the ground in the farmland buffer, below the ground, there is a lateral that brings the sanitary sewer to the back of that building. It does not prevent us from landscaping and developing that buffer area on the surface in a manner that is consistent with the ordinance's direction. But yes, there's a lateral, an underground lateral that's proposed.
Thanks.
No, thank you for making that point.
Okay, can we get to the full board page? Okay, any questions at this point from the board? Board professionals?
Mr. Chairman, where is the, I wanted to ask the engineer, where is this additional parking spaces that we had asked about from the last meeting?
There may be another exhibit that can be put up.
So, and then just to clarify with the board and Mr. Paper, check and clarify if I'm incorrect in stating this, but reviewing the transcript, I believe they agreed to provide 2 additional standard parking spaces. And then also at the time of site plan, provide parking spaces for their box truck size vehicles, not utilizing the existing or the proposed loading areas that are shown on the site plan. Is that accurate, Mr. Pate?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And those commitments were made to the board.
I think that will be at site plan. Am I
Okay.
correct,
Yes.
Mr. Pate?
Yes.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Mertz?
Yeah, I'm good with that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board or board professionals?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
so I'd like again to achieve some clarification.
Yes,
Existing driveway. Mr. Pape says it can't be completely remediated, removed, transformed. I thought I thought the existing driveway was going to be completely remediated along with the storage area that Mr. Ennie pointed out, which is that outside that dark green line, right? So, I can't, express enough that you cannot continue to use that area of the property in any way, shape, or form, and then expand what you're doing right now. It doesn't make any sense. It's a very environmentally sensitive area. It needs to be well managed, and it needs to be remediated. Oh,
Mr. Say, I thank you for bringing it up again. It gives us an opportunity to give a clear answer. I'm going to ask if we could have Mr. Howard place the same picture in front of the board. And then Dr. Raymond Walker who testified previously, is here. I'm going to ask if he could assist me in going through the environmental cleanup. I'm going to try, as lawyers try, I'm going to try to put some words together, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Walker to confirm. When you look at the existing driveway and the asphalt, we'll call it turnaround area, that is located at the top of the picture on the right, to me, on the left-hand side, that will be removed in its entirety. It will be gone. The area will be restored. The area will no longer have an access driveway or any active utility. The new driveway that is located below that, the testimony of our engineer is we have moved it as far away as possible from the stream, but our entire frontage is in the flood hazard area. So we are as far away from the stream corridor as possible, but that portion of the new driveway does require relief. And when Dr. Walker testified last month, he indicated that all of the improvements that are shown, he was comfortable can and will be approved by the DEP. Dr. Walker, I thank you for joining us again this evening. I remind you that you're under oath. I remind the board that you were qualified as an environmental scientist, and I'd ask if you could just briefly go through briefly address the concerns raised by Mr. Saya.
I think there's just a misunderstanding, Ken, when you spoke, you mentioned something about the driveway couldn't be moved any further. And I believe the arrow was pointing at the old driveway, not the new driveway. But the old driveway will be completely removed and that area will be completely restored. I think that's just a minor misunderstanding there, but that area will be removed and restored. The storage area up here will be removed and restored. There'll be no encroachments into wetlands, no encroachments into wetland transition areas, and only a minor encroachment into the riparian buffer for the stormwater management feature and the roadway. And as I testified the last time, we've reviewed this plan with DEP in terms of the permittable design for this basin within the outer 150, the riparian buffer, and they were okay with that. But I think that was the misunderstanding. I think Mr. Saya was thinking that this road was going to remain, where actually that is coming out, and this is the main road coming in now.
Mr. Saya, does that address your question?
that partially addresses it.
So Mr. Salem, I'm going to ask a couple of pointed questions, and hopefully this clarifies it for the board and just for the record. So Ken, I believe at the prior hearing, we did request and the applicant agreed to, along the limits of the wetlands buffer, the applicant agreed to put in an actual monumented easement restriction and propose a fence there, so that way it'll delineate for this owner and applicant and any potential future owner that those are regulated areas. You're not allowed to do any activities beyond that. That was agreed to.
Yes, Mr. Cunliffe, I'd like to there was a question from the board. How do we make certain that these encroachments do not recur? And I indicated there was legal and physical ways, physically monumenting, monuments that come out of the ground that identify the limits of the environmental constraint. There was a suggestion by the chair that we add a fence. A fence is also an acceptable physical. We could also landscape on either side of the fence so that there's physically monuments, fence, and landscaping delineating the limit. We can also record the conservation easement that is consistent with that. And as this board is wont to do, we can, any resolution adopted by this board can include those restrictions and can be recorded as a restriction against the property. So legal and physical methods are available.
And then Mr. Walker, to clarify Mr. Samonte's testimony, so the 300-foot buffer physically carries past the southeast corner of the property line there. So there's no practical way to relocate the site driveway to be entirely out of that buffer and still be along the Ramtown Greenville Road frontage. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. And then just one point of clarity. So have you had a chance to review any of the aerials that were prepared with regards to the historic going back to 1931 and the site driveway?
Yes, I provided them to Mr. Pape.
So do you know when the wetlands rules and the flood hazard area rules came into place, and whether, in your opinion, that driveway may have existed prior to those rules?
It did. The freshwater wetland rules in New Jersey took effect in 1988. The flood hazard rules were in place probably before that in the early 80s. But again, that driveway was there since at least 1960.
So in your professional opinion, regardless of the outcome of this application, how the site currently exists with the building on the site and the location of the driveway, is that legally existing and predates any environmental rules?
Correct. It predates any of the environmental rules that would have restricted those improvements there today.
So with this application, we're rectifying something that predates the rules, and what we're proposing is compliant or is going to obtain any permits as required for DEP with regards to wetlands and flood hazard area riparian zones.
That's correct.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Sayed, does that answer some of your question there?
That's partly, but then we have to still talk about a couple of other things. One is the storage area. Mr. Ennie said that there was a fenced-in storage area.
That's all being removed.
Well, you know, Mr. Pape didn't clarify that yet.
Okay, so thank you. The area that is being identified by the arrow is currently a gravel area, and there is a metal fence in poor repair around it, and it appears that there's the remnants of gates, and that was some form of a compound that was built by someone prior to our client. Our client has not used it at all. That compound will be completely removed. The stone and gravel will be removed. The fencing and gate will be removed. And the entire area is proposed, and your applicant commits to, revegetating in a manner consistent with Ms. Spiro's instructions. We anticipate that it would be wetland tolerant species allowed to naturalize and revegetate.
And Mr. Pape, correct me if I'm wrong, or Mr. Walker can correct me if I'm wrong. Anytime you revegetate a wetlands buffer area, you need to prepare like a mitigation plan that's subject to their review and approval?
Correct.
And this would be subject to their review, approval, and our board CTE?
Yes.
And would be in that area that's subject to the physical and legal protections to make certain it doesn't recur.
Okay, and then Charlie, Mr. Pape.
Yes, sir.
You know, professionals. So the new proposed driveway, the portion of it that's in the 300. Charlie, what if, is it possible to elevate that, you know, with a Bailey bridge or something to that effect so that it has proper drainage and doesn't become, you know, a hazard to the basin that's being proposed? to some degree? Can you direct the water? Can we do something to, you know?
So I'll let Mr. Samonte opine to it, but in my review of the stormwater management proposed for the site, all the runoff generated by the existing proposed building parking area is completely contained and captured with the proposed stormwater conveyance system in the parking area and directed to one of the 3 on-site stormwater management basins. So, you know, obviously we don't have a full detailed grading plan for the roadway and everything, but at least from the grades provided for the drainage structures for the parking area, to me, it appears that everything is captured and contained on site in these stormwater management basins. And as Mr. Cape pointed out, the existing building that's on the site there right now exists without stormwater management infrastructure. They're proposing stormwater management infrastructure, not just for the proposed expansion at the rear of the site. The stormwater management infrastructure also captures and retains and reduces flows for the development that exists on the front of the site as well. So I think that's important to point out for the board.
Charlie, to what? To the 100-year plan or?
Yes, yeah. So, and then to that added extent, so in my original review letter, you know, anytime you have a bifurcated use application where there's not a lot of site details and stormwater management design, you know, we have cases where an applicant may get a use approval and then take some time to file their site plan approval. Knowing that the impending stormwater management regulations were changing in March of this year, we requested that the applicant, you know, design the stormwater management system in large part, conceptually to a very high degree in accordance with the new regulations. So what you see on there, you know, isn't just, you know, the old regulations, it's the new regulations that were adopted this March. There's green infrastructure requirements, maximum drainage areas to stormwater management basin. The original concept and submission that was submitted to this board with the application was one stormwater management basin at the front of the site along the site driveway. It was partially in the inner 150 foot portion of that 300-foot riparian buffer. They've since reduced the footprint, so it's only in the outer 150. And then there's 2 additional stormwater management basins at the rear of the site. And along with those green infrastructure requirements, there's restrictions on how much drainage area can flow to those basins. Previously, you could do 1 regional stormwater management basin for an entire site. Now you have a maximum contributed drainage area of 2.5 acres. So what you're seeing here is a reflection of the new stormwater management rules. So when they come in for site plan, the site details and the layout, apart from those parking changes that were testified to at the last hearing, what you're seeing now should be, you know, 90 to 95% of what is going to be presented to you at site plan. Ken and Mr. Samonte, is that accurate in what I've?
Yeah, no, I'm going to say to the board, Mr. Cunliffe was very demanding of the engineer, wanted to have a comfort level that this was not just a pretty picture, that it could be engineered. And Mr. Samonte was charged with going back out into the field and gathering additional data and redesigning it and substantially engineering it so that your engineer would have a comfort level. It also gave us an enhanced comfort level. And Mr. Samonte, I'm going to ask if you would confirm that that was the investigation that you did, and it is your professional opinion that these basins can be designed to be compliant with both the township and the state's 2021 regulations.
Oh, that definitely. I just wanted to maybe help Mr. Saya just clarify for him that because the driveway's in the riparian buffer does not by any way imply that it's flood prone. The area of the driveway is anywhere between 3 and 12 feet higher than the base flood elevation. So that driveway isn't flood prone. It just happens to be within the riparian buffer, which is a vegetative concern, not a flooding concern. So both that driveway and the bioretention basin are outside any areas that are that are prone to flooding.
And Mr. Saya, with a 300-foot riparian buffer, there's an inner 150 and an outer 150. In the inner 150, there is close to, nothing you can do within that inner 150. The outer 150 is more lenient. It still requires environmental permits. I'll allow Mr. Walker to opine on, obviously, that they've been in correspondence with DEP, and what they're presenting to you now is with the input from DEP as it goes to the site layout that's presented to you.
Yes, the DEP provides you some relief, especially if that riparian buffer has been disturbed. So for instance, if this was an entirely wooded area, they probably wouldn't be as accommodating, but because it's pretty much been disturbed since 1960, they will allow you certain improvements such as stormwater basins in that outer 150.
And to that point, Mr. Saya, any potential board approval is conditioned on all outside agency approvals. Should the applicant fail to secure those outside agency approvals from DEP for what they're proposing in the outer 150-foot buffer, they would need to come back to the board, for approval with some, modified rendering of what's proposed to the site.
Go ahead.
That answer?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Charlie, Mr. Pate,
Yes, sir.
I'm professionals. So, since we heard this application firsthand, I have driven past, I've witnessed, I've looked around the surrounding area. First and foremost, the site remediation, I believe, is very important, pertinent to the residents in that area that are surrounding the area. I believe the site does need extensive, cleanup. I'm trying to balance everything in my mind with, the professionals and where we're going and where we're trying to get to. And, when I take the storage area, for instance, and I'm just talking here, but I want to talk on the record, in that outside area, when you remove that outside storage area where we had the overhead, where there was trucks, buses, whatever was under there stored, we're not going to do that anymore. I suspect that was a pretty significant square footage of gravel that's there, right? And so we're going to remediate that in return for a building that's going to be modern. It's going to have all the environmentals addressed and all of the storm water management addressed. And the previous disturbed areas are going to be remediated. And I think that is good business. So, Charlie, do you agree with me or not?
So certainly, regardless of how if this board were, hypothetically, if this board were not to act favorably on this application, right? The site is going to continue to operate how it operates without any of these stormwater management improvements. The site driveway, as Mr. Walker testified, predates a lot of those rules, can continue to operate how it is. The storage area, that's another matter that potentially came at some point later and they need to rectify it. But yes, the stormwater management, the site driveway as it's existing, without this site plan application, could those go away and being rectified? I would say that's an accurate statement.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, sir.
If I may, Mr. Say, I appreciate your sharing your thoughts. Your applicant has put tremendous work into this and has explored with each of his professionals what each of those disciplines could provide as an improvement to the site, and asked that we identify the benefits to the township and the community. So you pointed out the stormwater management, and you pointed out the environmental encroachments, and you pointed out a modern building. There's so much more. There's the landscaping, the farmland buffers, the removal of encroachments, the putting permanent protections onto the property. There's road improvements that are proposed. Our client already, and this was on the record last time, spent over $300,000 bringing a water main to this property. But it's not just to this property. He brought it a great distance for all in the area. So there is a water main, and on that water main, he installed hydrants. So there's considerable benefits, and they're calculated by your applicant to make certain that there is a benefit to the community and to the township. So I appreciate that you commented on them. And with that, Mr. Chair, if we're ready, and if the board is ready, we'll go ahead with Mr. Ray.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. John Ray was sworn as part of the professionals being sworn. He was sworn, but his credentials are not part of the record for this application.
Can we bring the full board back?
Okay. Sure. And
thank you.
It occurred to me to make, so we have a court reporter working with us this evening to make sure a transcript is available. Was Angela let in? I know that I don't see Angela Buontuano being let in. Just want to make sure that she is.
Let her in.
There we go.
She's on there.
Okay. Angela, if you could just come on for just 1 second, if you could confirm that you've been taking this transcription down since the beginning of the hearing tonight.
You will need to unmute.
You got to unmute, Angela, just for a moment.
Is that her calling in?
Yeah, Angela, can you unmute for a moment?
Hold on 1 minute.
There she is.
Okay, Angela's good. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Ray, if we could hear your credentials on the record.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm still sworn in. I don't recall being sworn at the last meeting. If Mr. Tropoli wants to go through that one more time, that's fine with me. I don't recall.
Was it Tropoli?
Mr. Ray, easy enough done. Raise your right hand, please. You swear the testimony you give this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, self to God.
I do.
Thank you. Proceed, Mr. King.
Thank you. Mr. Ray, if you could share with the board that you've been part of this professional team since the inception of the plan, and that your guidance and counsel has been provided to the client throughout the design phase of this project.
Mr.
I have. It's been several years, yes.
Mr. Pate, let's qualify Mr. Ray real quick.
Oh,
Very sorry. I got ahead of myself. Mr. Ray, your credentials, please. Thank you.
sure. I'm a licensed professional engineer. My field of specialty is traffic engineering. I have 45 years total experience, and no, 47 now. I'm losing track. 47 years experience in the traffic engineering field. An undergraduate degree in civil engineering from NJIT and a master's degree in transportation engineering from NYU. And I've been doing traffic impact studies in the state of New Jersey for the last 37 years. And I've appeared before this board on numerous occasions as an expert witness, as well as many, many planning and zoning boards throughout the state, including just about every board, I think, if not in Monmouth and Ocean and Middlesex counties.
We accept your credentials, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Nancy.
Thank you. And I'll ask my questions in the right order. If you would confirm that you've been part of the team working on this project since its inception.
I have, yes.
And you've made yourself familiar with the client's business operation and,
I have.
and our client's property.
Yes.
And if you, and I know that you have been to the property, are you familiar with the adjacent roadway, its characteristics and its dimensions?
I am. I have been to the site on numerous occasions. in the course of doing the traffic impact study for this project and just being generally familiar with the area, it's really not far from my office. I'm familiar with the roadway network as it is, but several visits have been made specifically with respect to this application.
And if you could begin by describing the type of roadway upon which this property has frontage.
Well, Ramtown Greenville Road is a road that I would characterize as a collector roadway. It collects and distributes traffic from various residential subdivisions, commercial properties along Ramtown Greenville Road. It collects and distributes that traffic to other higher order roadways such as County Line Road, Newton's Corner Road up to the northeast. It is characterized as a collector roadway.
Thank you. And do you have a sense of what that roadway's capacity to handle traffic is?
I do, and based on the traffic counts that we've collected along Ramtown Greenville Road, which were done pre-COVID counts in late October, early November 2019, it carries a little bit less than 3,000 vehicles per day in two directions near the property frontage. That squarely puts it in the collector roadway category, and technically the capacity of the roadway to handle traffic is significantly higher than the 3,000 or so vehicles per day that it carries. The capacity is probably 4 or 5 times that amount. Not that we're going to generate that much traffic, but it is operating well within its rated capacity.
Okay. I think I'm going to ask that we begin with your description of our new driveway location as it comes out onto Ramtown Greenville Road. And I'm looking for horizontal and vertical conditions that exist at the point of connection and a professional opinion as to its adequacy and safety.
Sure. As has been testified to by our engineer, Mr. Sermont, and there's been much discussion, the existing driveway, which is approximately 18 feet wide, which is located to the west of where the new driveway is proposed. As I said, it's approximately 18 feet wide. It will be replaced with a 30-foot wide driveway with proper curb returns at a location further east, and where the sight distance will be more than acceptable for a 40-mile-an-hour roadway such as Ramtown Greenville Road. That is the posted speed limit for the roadway. And the proposed new location of the roadway, assuming that proper sight triangles will be established, which we will certainly agree to do. If it hasn't been done for the use variance application, it will certainly be done for the site plan application. The site distance along Ramtown Greenville Road will meet and exceed accepted engineering standards.
You have an opinion that the location chosen by Mr. Sermont is the optimum location for the driveway?
Well, as it turns out, not only does it get the driveway out of the environmentally sensitive areas, but it also helps me as a traffic engineer because it gives me proper sight distance in both directions along Ramtown Greenville Road. So it works on both accounts.
Okay, thank you. And your knowledge of the area, the necessary site triangles that would be associated with the driveway to make certain that those conditions stay safe. Does it appear to you that there's adequate area for those site triangles to be imposed on the property?
Yes, there is.
I'm going to ask if we could go on site, and there's a lot to talk about on site. If you could describe to us certain characteristics of on-site circulation. Let's begin with something very important, and that is the fire truck. And we can then go to the other emergency vehicles and the vehicles that are anticipated by our client's business. Before you testify, I'll remind the board, we met with Fire Chief Lewis. Actually, we met with him on multiple occasions going over this plan, and that the plan that is before you represents the plan that was changed to reflect requirements of Fire Chief Lewis. And with that, I'm going to ask if you could describe how this site would handle fire trucks and other emergency vehicles.
The roadway coming in from Ramtown Greenville Road is dimensioned at 30 feet wide. That is certainly more than adequate to handle emergency vehicles, delivery vehicles, pointing out that legally the width of even a tractor trailer in the state of New Jersey or a a fire truck is no wider than 8.5 feet wide. We have a 30-foot wide driveway for two-way traffic. It is more than sufficient to get emergency vehicles, delivery vehicles. I've heard the testimony of Mr. Stefanski regarding the number and type of trucks that access the site on a regular basis. And in fact, the site has been designed generously with probably a little bit more, width of pavement than the minimum would be required. But it's been designed properly just to make sure that all of those trucks, including deliveries, emergency vehicles, can access the site, move into the areas they need to move into safely and efficiently. Yes.
There was some discussion about trash and recyclable materials being removed from the site. Are you comfortable that the design is adequate and safe for those types of truck movements?
Yes, it is. Again, the refuse removal trucks are certainly no wider than 8.5 feet wide. We have a 30-foot wide cartway. It's more than adequate for two-way traffic. Yes.
Our client indicated that the trucks that come to his property, currently he has straight trucks that are 20 feet long. He indicated that those could be replaced over time with 24-foot long trucks. He also indicated that there are 2 and occasionally a 3rd articulated tractor trailer movement daily on site. I know that you were present during Mr. Stefanski's testimony. I know that you interviewed Mr. Stefanski before he testified. Are you comfortable advising this board that these driveways will accommodate those vehicles safely and adequately?
Very comfortable. Yes, they will.
Okay. And we were charged with confirming that the necessary turning templates have been tested against the site. Are you comfortable advising the board that the turning templates for those types of vehicles can be accommodated on all of the driveways that are shown?
Well, there's one driveway to Ramtown Greenville Road, but the on-site, the access into the loading areas is it's been tested and it's acceptable. Yes.
Do we have anything that shows that? I mean, like, I understand that it's easier to see everybody, but like you're testifying about what's going on the site and no one can see the site plan.
No.
Site plan?
I don't know if Mr. Samant has done a truck circulation plan, but I've laid templates on the plan, but I don't know if he's done an actual truck circulation plan.
Yeah, I have in my possession, I wish that I have a black and white of the circulation plan that was prepared by Mr. Samant. It's part of the record. It was.
Is that part of our record? Was that part of it?
Yeah, circulation plan originally dated August 17th, 2020, last revised February 4th, 2021. It is part of the materials that were filed.
And I think you might even have a more recent version of that, if I'm not mistaken. I think you submitted a more recent version, revised March 15th, 2021.
Mr. Samant, if you could help me out here, I'm working from the February one, which demonstrated that it worked. But perhaps while Mr. Ray is talking, if Mr. Howard could assist us and put the rendering up again, we can use that to locate the driveways.
Yeah, Ken, I believe that was included as part of the 5-page site plan application, sheet 4 of 5. So
thank you. So if you would very briefly, Mr. Ray, let's see what we can put. It won't be rendered.
Eileen, when do we go back live?
Yeah, good question.
Mr. Chair, I got to tell you something. We've been doing this now for 1.5 years, and we've been doing it in many, many towns. There are very few that have a platform as clean as the platform in Howell. Very, very few.
No, I understand. Okay, I see what you're talking about.
And if we could point out to the board that at the very, very end of the property, at the far end of the proposed building expansion, that turnaround facility was specifically part of Chief Lewis's recommendations. So that, yeah. So, and I would ask if you would comment, Mr. Ray, does the current circulation plan, the circulation plan for the existing building, have the same qualities? Is there the same efficiency of movement and the safety of movement on site that is as shown on this plan?
No, the current configuration of the property makes it somewhat more difficult for the tractor trailers and even the box trucks to maneuver through the site.
So are you comfortable advising the board and all present that this is a safety improvement to the site?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And just, I want to clarify a couple of things just to remind the board that, so the applicant, obviously, they're going to stripe all the lanes as fire lanes and provide signage, and they also agreed to Title 39 enforcement on the site. So there's no parking on the main driveway aisles. And then as far as the site driveway, just to clarify from Mr. Ray's perspective. So the existing driveway, the location of that is in close proximity to the bridge crossing over Muddy Ford Brook, which itself has a horizontal curve to it.
That's correct.
In your professional opinion, is it from a site distance perspective, a more safe alternative in the location that's proposed, moving it further away from a horizontal curve?
That's correct, Mr. Cunliffe. That's true. Yes.
Now, how about from driving west on Ramtown Greenville Road? I know looking at Google Earth and aerial imagery, there's a decent amount of wooded vegetation on the neighboring property. How does the site driveway there fare as far as site distance with some of that vegetation?
I'm not sure exactly what vegetation you're referring to, Mr. Cunliffe, whether it's on or off our property. I know we can provide the proper AASHTO site triangles for our driveway. I would only opine that if that vegetation is within the municipal right-of-way and it's creating any kind of a site distance issue for any driveway in the area, it should probably be looked at and trimmed back if it affects any driveway in the area. So
So what I would
yeah.
say, subject to the township PD and in-house engineering department, would if any of that vegetation in the public right of way was in a required site triangle for that driveway, would the applicant agree to remove that vegetation at no cost or effort to the township?
And further agree to maintain it so that the driveway system is always safe. Yes, Mr. Cunliffe.
That's all I have for the moment.
Okay. Mr. Ray, I believe, Mr. Ray and I always work from prepared outlines. I believe that we have made our presentation to the board, and I just would ask if you could conclude with a professional opinion as to the adequacy and safety of the design. Do you have any reservations in recommending to the board that this is an adequate and safe design?
No, I have no reservations. I think in addition to the environmental aspects of the property being cleaned up, I think the traffic safety aspects of the property will be enhanced should this plan be approved. I also just want to say that the traffic impact study that I've done looks at the additional square footage that will be created. You've heard the testimony of Mr. Stefanski regarding his operation and the fact that although he does anticipate there may be some small increase in the number of employees and the number of delivery vehicles, I have taken a look at a worst case scenario, one in which this property is sold to somebody else and it generates traffic at a higher rate at the Institute of Transportation Engineers rate, which I've looked at for the square footage of the warehouse and the office property. And I've looked at this worst case scenario, which is basically looking at my traffic study, approximately twice the amount of traffic that the operation described by Mr. Stefanski will generate. And even if it generates twice the amount of traffic, the levels of service at the site driveway will continue to be level of service B, which is a good level of service, which essentially indicates that based on the traffic flow along Ramtown Greenville Road and the amount of traffic that will be generated by the site, that delays to vehicles exiting onto Ramtown Greenville Road will be minimal during peak hours or during any hour of the day, in fact. I just wanted to point out that we did do an extensive traffic count program. We installed an automatic traffic counter across Ramtown Greenville Road in the summer of 2019. We reinstalled it again in the fall, like I said, in October and early November 2019. Several hundred hours of continuous traffic volume data was collected. And I'm very confident based on that traffic volume data and the plan that's in front of the board that the use variance application can be approved without having an adverse or detrimental impact on traffic conditions in the area.
Mr. Ray, I just got one question. Okay, I know you touched on the level B service coming out of this driveway. The
Yes.
intersection, the closest intersections either way of Ramtown, Greenville, what are the levels of service at those intersections? Did you happen to look at that?
Okay, looking back towards, I guess back toward the west, the nearest intersection would be Arnold Boulevard. We did do traffic counts at Arnold Boulevard. We did not do a level of service calculation because the ITE, the recommendation for an off-site traffic impact study is any location where you generate 100 additional peak hour trips is a location that needs to be studied. We don't meet that threshold, but I can tell you from doing the manual turning movement counts at Arnold Boulevard that the levels of service at that intersection are very similar to what our driveway will experience. I'd be very surprised if it was anything worse than level of service B. Heading back up in the other direction, Ramtown Greenville Road does eventually intersect up at Newton's Corner Road where there are a couple of commercial properties. Delays up at that intersection are a little bit more substantial because of the higher traffic flow on Newton's Corner Road. But again, you know, we are well short of the 100 additional trip threshold, you know, adding that much traffic to that intersection. But I would tell you, I think that intersection may be operating at something lower than level of service B. But based on my observations and peak hour visits to the area, it's still within acceptable levels. It's certainly not an F, but it may not be a B.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
would you ask the expert to please define service level B for me?
Yeah, level B, level of service B, it's related to the delay that motorists experience. Give me 1 second.
On the road or motorists coming to and from?
Level of service B is delay, if I'm not mistaken, between 10 and 20 seconds per vehicle entering the roadway.
From and to the property itself, correct?
And entering Ramtown Greenville Road from our driveway, the delay will be between 10 and 20 seconds for the average vehicle. Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
you're welcome.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask some additional clarifying questions. So the applicant's traffic report stated that the applicant anticipated typically one tractor trailer vehicle trip to the site per day. And we've since heard subsequent testimony that it could be 2, possibly 3 under, you know, holiday periods. I just asked Mr. Ray's testimony on how going from 1 to 2 or potentially 3 impacts the level of service of the site driveway, the surrounding networks. And then also with that, when typically during a normal workday, we can anticipate those trips to come to the site. I think the traffic report indicates the AM peak hour is 7 to 8 AM and that the PM peak hour is 2 to 3 PM. Mr. Ray, those peak hours, would those typically be consistent with obviously the AM rush with work and school hours, but also for the PM with school hours letting in and out?
Yeah, I think in most instances, Mr. Conliffe, the afternoon peak hour would occur after 2 to 3 p.m. But in this instance, because of the middle school and the elementary school up the road on Ramtown Greenville Road, 2 to 3 is actually the peak hour in the afternoon. So it's a little bit different than, let's say, something out on Route 9, which would be more 4 to 5, 5 to 6 for an afternoon peak hour.
So what I
So,
would,
you know, we acknowledge that factor. I do not think one additional tractor trailer, or even maybe 2, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Mr. Stefanski's testimony was that he currently has 1 or 2 tractor trailer trips per day. And if this is approved, he may have an additional tractor trailer. I think over the course of a business day, which I believe is, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere between 6 and 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. over a 12-hour period, if you had 1 more truck entering and exiting the site, I don't think that would have any impact on the level of service. And I don't think it would be significant.
so what I would suggest to Mr. Pape as this meeting proceeds, if we have a recess, to maybe consult with your applicant, whether they'd be willing to agree to some type of condition where those truck deliveries and departures of the tractor trailers do not occur during the peak hour, so as not to disrupt, you know, the peak traffic flows, especially during the times of, you know, school let in and let out. And then along those lines, as far as the truck traffic, so with the truck trailer traffic and the box traffic. So to the north, obviously, we're saying the northern terminus is Newton's Corner Road. You can go north or south, north to north parts of House, south to get down to the Parkway. There is a substantial amount of residential development along Ramtown Greenville Road as you approach Newton's Corner Road, Western Boulevard or Western Drive, and portions of that seem to could potentially be a possible cut-through location to get to the reformatted interchange at Garden State Parkway exit. I think it's 91 there.
91. Yeah.
Is there any, you know, obviously I think the applicant provided testimony that the trucking is going to be a third party. There's not going to be any park trucking or tractor trailer parking on site overnight. What kind of assurances can we get from the applicant that they'll be able to dictate, you know, the traffic patterns for those tractor trailer deliveries to not impact those residential neighborhoods and utilize a shorter period? I know, you know, nowadays, you know, with Waze and things like that, someone puts it into a GPS and a route you never thought of taking ends up popping up on your screen, and you can easily be detoured through other areas. I think from the board's perspective, we want to hear how that is going to be managed from the applicant's perspective for the site operations.
Understood. And I have spoken to my client and to Mr. Pape regarding this, and it is my understanding, and Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, that our applicant is willing to establish truck routes for the tractor trailers so that they don't impact those residential neighborhoods. He's willing to do that. How that gets worked into a resolution or enforced, I'm not, you know, I'm just an engineer, but he's willing to do that. The only other thing I would say is, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Cunliffe, I think that issue regarding Western Drive, which is a collector roadway within that residential area between exit 91 of the Parkway and Ramtown Greenville Road, you had mentioned that in one of your previous reports. And as a result, I did go out and take a look at that, and I did some travel time runs. And actually, if you were to take Western Drive, and I'm just talking about a passenger vehicle, somebody that may be coming to work at the facility, it would actually take them a minute longer to take that route because of the lower speed limits and the curvature of the road and the things of that nature than if they just stayed on County Line Road and came in, you know, on the more major roads. But it's a totally legitimate point. It's a good point. And we did take a look at that. And although we don't think it would offer any time advantages to anybody to use that route, as I've indicated, it's my recollection, we've spoken to the client about that, and he's willing to restrict trucks to take the more major roads to get to the site.
If I may, Mr. Chair and board members, there was examination by Mr. Mertens of Mr. Stefanski on the record at the May 10th meeting that was very similar, and Mr. Stefanski made statements on the record. I'm looking at the transcript, pages 144 forward, and what the statements were that all of the trucks that make deliveries from the site are owned by our client and would continue to be our client's own trucks and drivers. And they have total control over when they exit the site. All of the deliveries they're not our own trucks, but the testimony was that the warehouse manager controls when a truck comes to the site. And Mr. Stefanski stated not before 9 a.m. He made a statement on the record, no deliveries before 9 a.m. And those deliveries conclude at 12 noon. So we're comfortable placing on the record, as very similar to what Mr. Ray just described, using the statements of Stephen Stefanski, that 9 to 12 is when we will have our scheduled tractor trailer deliveries, and that we accept that as a condition.
So, and then just to kind of re-summarize that, Glenn, just to kind of make sure it's clear for the board. So all the SU-40, you know, maximum 24-foot long box trucks, you know, the 4 currently up to 6 proposed as they grow, those are all owned and operated by the applicant. They have complete control of that. It's the 2 to possibly 3 tractor trailers, which are third party, which the applicants agreed to the restriction only between the hours of 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. noon.
Yes. Yes, thank you for assisting us in clarifying it. And those are the comments that are on the record by your applicant from the May 10th meeting.
Okay. Well,
and I
That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Sorry.
Mr. Pape, are you concluded with Mr. Ray?
I have concluded the direct examination of Mr. Ray. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Is there any other questions from the board?
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I have another question.
Yes, sir.
Charlie, I see that it's proposed approximately 10 parking spots. And 2 parts here. One, do we believe that's enough? And number 2, is there going to be a prohibition on pulling the cars inside the warehouse? And I say that because if there's an overflow of parking that's not going to be available, where else do you put the cars? And if we're going to do that, you know, what are the safety features of bringing a vehicle inside the warehouse?
Mr. Saya, if I could try to respond, I believe we previously agreed at the May 10th meeting to add 2 additional parking spaces, and I think the number, it's more than 10. I think we agreed to increase it from, and somebody can correct me if I'm either 20 to 22 or 22 to 24, I don't recall. But we did agree to provide for 2 more parking spaces in order to accommodate the anticipated employee demand. As far as vehicles pulling inside the building, I do not believe that is going to be allowed, but I would probably let the applicant, Mr. Pape, or the architect, Mr. Radosky, you know, relate to that. But it's never been my understanding that any of the employees would park their cars inside one of the buildings.
I just received from Mr. Stefanski authorization to make a statement. There is virtually no room in the warehouse. There is no garage door access, and forbidding vehicles from being brought into the warehouse is an acceptable condition.
And Mr. Saya, so they are proposing currently 20 parking spaces. They agreed to provide 2 additional that'll have to be provided at site plan. And as far as the existing loading dock, I think we exhausted that at the last hearing. There's not going to be any parking permitted in those spaces overnight. They're going to provide additional parking for those box truck parking, vehicles on the site. And then the loading dock, that's all, it slopes down as you approach the loading dock. So you can't physically pull a vehicle in the loading dock, one of the entranceways into the building. You know, the tailgate of the box truck backs up to the loading dock, so you can wheel stuff right off the truck onto the loading dock. So there's no physical way as opposed, as provided by testimony by the architect at the last hearing. There's no way to drive a vehicle in those loading docks into the building.
Well, as long as we prohibit it, Charlie, then I'm satisfied.
So, and what I'll say is obviously, this has to go to site plan if the board rules favorably on the use. And then beyond that point, they have to get resolution compliance from my office, the, board's planner, Sherry, and then they have to submit drawings to the engineering department. So if there's ever any change to the architectural renderings or the site plan where something at that later point was proposed, it would have to come back to the board. That would change the makeup of the application.
That's all I got, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, anybody else on the board have any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Ray, one quick question. What is the weight limit of that bridge? Maybe Charlie, you might know.
Yeah, I didn't see a posted weight limit. I think the county just reconstructed that bridge. Maybe Mr. Cunliffe knows better than I do.
There's no weight limit.
No weight restriction?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm looking at Google Street View dated November 2020, and I can't see any posted
Not one.
weight limits there.
Okay.
And is that Ramtown, Greenville, is that a county road?
No, that's a township road, if I'm not mistaken. But the bridge is under the jurisdiction of the county, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Cunliffe.
That sounds accurate.
Wouldn't we want to know the weight limit at some time? I mean, I'm not saying we're going to be having, these trucks are going to be over weight limit, but is that something that we as a board should know prior?
Being a truck driver and knowing that if it's not posted, it's an 80,000 pound weight limit. If it's not posted.
Okay.
And if back up at Orno Boulevard, if you turned onto Ramtown Greenville Road, it would have to be posted at the entrance of that roadway on any entrance on Ramtown Greenville Road. And there is no truck signs whatsoever, or weight limit signs.
Okay.
There was one comment that was made by Charlie that we didn't confirm, but and Mr. Cunliffe stated that Title 39 designation for the property was a request of the board. Title 39 designation, when filed properly with the township, allows the township's police force to come on the property and enforce all of Title 39 traffic control on site. And we do agree to that. We do agree that Title 39 should be enforced on our property, and we'll do the necessary application.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay.
Well, I just want, Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask Mr. Tropoli if he's catching everything there, and ask him how he's doing. Because there's a lot going on, sir.
There's a lot going on, and Mr. Pape has been good enough to provide us with transcripts, and I am sure that we will have a full transcript, which I will be more than happy to review as part of the resolution. But rest assured, Mr. Saya, I'm doing everything I can to catch all the including the Title 39 request.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Seeing no other questions, Mr. Pape, let's take a 10-minute break or a 5-minute break. 10 minutes, that'll work.
Yeah.
Eileen, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
So we're back on the record at 5 minutes of 9, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I thank you.
For members of the public, the board will now take a 10-minute recess. They'll be back at 8:55 p.m. Thank you.
Eileen, you want to call us back?
The zoning board will now reconvene.
Mr. Pape.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We're going to call you next witness, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the applicant's next witness is Christine Cafone, a professional planner. And I would ask if, just to be safe, I'll ask Mr. Tropoli to swear her in, and then we'll go right into her credentials.
Christine, please raise your right hand and swear the testimony you'll give this evening be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
May I state your name for the record, please?
It's Christine Nazaro, Nazzaro, Cofone, Cofone. Business address is 125 Half Mile Road, Suite 200, Red Bank, New Jersey, 07701. I am testifying this evening as a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. My license is current and valid. I've been qualified here in Howell and in excess of 400 planning boards throughout the state of New Jersey.
We accept your credentials.
Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, thank you. Ms. Cofone will be testifying as a professional planner. Ms. Cofone, I'm going to ask if you would, as I often do, to testify in a narrative fashion. But if you could begin by letting the board know your involvement in this application and what you do to be prepared to present an application such as this to the board. And then if you would take us through the necessary proofs, if you could identify the facts upon which you rely, and we'd be most interested as you draw your professional opinion and conclusions as to whether this application can be granted.
Of course, yes. So good evening, Chairman and members of the board. So I guess the best place to start as to what I do to prepare and what my role is what I do to prepare is I review all of the application submission documents and go over the site plan with our project team. We do that extensively via Zoom these days, which is easy. We look at the plans. Then I review your professionals' review letters that they generate to go over the application. I review the professional review letters as well as the agency review letters. And then I also look at the zoning ordinance and the master plan. In addition to that, and perhaps one of the most important things we do as planners is we go to the site. We do that individually, but we also did that as a team just this past week. Our entire team met out there on site to walk the property and to talk about the application and really understand the application as it relates to the existing improvements on the subject property. That is particularly important to this application because the burden of proof that we're seeking from the Zoning Board of Adjustment is a D variance, a D2 for an expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming use. There's an enormous distinction between that and other applications that this board hears for use variances where we are looking to introduce a non-conforming use into a zone that it is not allowed. The case law is very clear that those types of uses are to be treated differently. Mr. Pape submitted earlier this evening substantial documentation that indicates that the property had been utilized for a warehousing type use dating back to the 1960s, which is older than both your planner and I before we were both on this earth. This application, and that's a long couple of decades, has been being utilized as a non-conforming warehouse. The property currently sits in the township's ARE2 zone where the use is not allowed, but make no mistake about it, the property is developed with about 17,500 square feet of commercial space, warehousing and office that has been there for decades. So again, I think it's really important, and that's why we as a team met out on the site, because that is it is a distinction with a difference in this particular application. In fact, when you're dealing with a expansion of a non-conforming use, the case law is very clear, and the prevailing case governing a expansion of a non-conforming use is the Burbridge v. Mine Hill case. And if I could just read a couple of sentences from Cox, because I think it really helps to frame the burden of proof that we have to demonstrate. Reading from the Cox book, in Burbridge v. Mine Hill Township, the court upheld the grant of a variance to expand a lawfully created pre-existing non-conforming junkyard where part of the plan called for relocation of unsightly parts of the business and improved landscaping and screening to improve the visual conformity of the property with surrounding residential uses. The court noted that applications to expand lawfully created pre-existing non-conforming uses offer boards opportunities to impose conditions, frequently aesthetic, which will help integrate the use with its surroundings, and especially important consideration for uses which are thriving and therefore not likely to end soon. So I think the subject application fits quite well in that, particularly the thriving and a use that's not likely to end soon. At the last hearing, when we were together back in May, there was significant discussion as to the infrastructure, specifically the sewer and water infrastructure that this application has already undertaken. They were done, they were not completed as part of this application. They were done to support the existing operations on the subject property, and of course, plan perhaps in conjunction with the application, and they knew where they were going to be filing, but there have been significant investments by the applicant in this property. So certainly, I think from a planning point of view, we can acknowledge that the use is thriving, is a pre-existing non-conforming use, has every right to continue, and is not likely to end soon. So what that does is it does create, in my opinion, for the board, opportunities. And you heard a lot of testimony from our earlier project team witnesses about some of the things and the opportunities and what I like to call, from a planning point of view, the betterments that will result as a indirect result of this application. And I think that they're important. They're important to me as the planner, because it's my job to talk about the negative criteria and the impact on the public good and the impact on the zone plan. That's why I go last. It's the planner's job to sort of wrap everything up together and talk about the negative criteria and the substantial detriment, and in this case, the betterments. And I think when you look at Burbridge, you know, that discussion talks specifically about the opportunities for the board. So if I could just sort of go through some of the betterments that I've been taking notes on that I think are relevant for the board's consideration and deliberation in conjunction with this use variance. And they're not really in any sort of order of magnitude, and that I think that they're more important. They're just the way that my notes flow. So of course you have the adding of the stormwater management to the site where none currently exists. It's particularly important given the fact that the township has adopted the new stormwater management regs, and we will comply with those. In addition to that, we're going to be removing all of the structures that currently exist from the critical environmental areas, and we're going to reforest those areas and replant same. And I think it's also important, and we testified to this last month, because that is not something that we're asking for forgiveness and permission for. It's not as if the applicant went and put those structures or those encroachments in there and now is coming to you this evening and saying, aren't I doing a wonderful job by removing those things that I put in there with no permission? Those things were there when the applicant took possession of this property. So I think that that's an important distinction, is that we are removing those structures that we did not permit there, or we did not put there. I know that this board is not a stranger to those applicants who are asking for forgiveness and permission simultaneously, and this application is not one to be lumped in that group. They are correcting those things that they did not do. Then there's about a 500 square foot portion of the building that we are eliminating, which eliminates most of it. There's a little tiny gore of that building that I think will still violate the side yard setback, but we're eliminating that, and that will become substantially more compliant, allowing us to also comply with the buffers. In addition to that, and I think one of the things that is really unique about this application is that we are relocating the truck circulation and the loading to be interior to the site in the breezeway area that is going to link the existing building and the proposed building. So I think that architecturally really is a creative design element. We have certainly upgraded the architectural curb appeal of the subject property. We are now what I believe to be conforming with your non-residential community design standards. And I do think that Ms. Beam has been satisfied. We know that architecture, as a team, we know that architecture is something that she is going to come down hard on us for consistently. And I think we did a good job of trying to address a lot of the concerns she raised. And I think last time she said she really liked the architecture. So I think we can certainly rely on the fact that we are increasing the curb appeal of the existing structure. We are providing a compliant buffer, and we are doing a substantial environmental cleanup. So when you look at the Burbridge case and you look at the fact that the case law on it talks about creating opportunity for the board to upgrade the site and to impose reasonable conditions. And I didn't even get to some of the conditions that we talked about. I know we agreed to restrict the tractor trailer times, to provide some fencing around the critical areas to the extent that we can be permitted to do it. So I think when the board considers all of these aspects and these improvements to the subject property for a use that is already here and not going away, and the applicants have made investment into the property as it is. So I think the board can certainly, as far as the positive criteria, there are a number of them that I think are advanced by this application. I think the board can certainly rely on criteria I, which talks about promoting a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. So sometimes we just testify to the beginning half of that special reason that talks about providing a desirable visual environment, and having a nice architectural building with great curb appeal certainly allows us to rely on the beginning half of that. But I think here, where you have the breezeway, which is what we will use for our loading and unloading, really allows us to utilize that purpose for the creative development techniques as well. So I think that that's certainly a very solid application. I think criteria A, promoting the general welfare. You have heard about the substantial things that we will do to upgrade and eliminate nonconformities into critical areas, and in conjunction with this application. So I think that that is certainly allows us to rely on promoting the general welfare. Criteria B also talks about securing from flooding. When you have a site that has absolutely no stormwater management on it, and you're gonna turn that around to do a 180 to have a site that will comply and introduce not only stormwater management, but stormwater management that complies with the new regulations, I think we can rely on criteria B of the land use law as well. And I think certainly criteria G, which talks about sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses, can be relied upon. This is an existing developed site. And I think, again, as I said earlier in my testimony, that is a distinction with a difference. So those are the positive criteria. Statutorily, we have an obligation to demonstrate that only one is satisfied. If we satisfy one or more, we can substantiate our burden of proof. I cited 4 criteria I, criteria A, criteria B, and criteria G. So I think we certainly, in my opinion, substantiate our burden of proof. With respect to the negative criteria talks about substantial detriment. And when you're contemplating that substantial detriment, you consider the impacts on both the zone plan as well as the public good. The board has heard a lot of testimony, and I already went over the benefits as well as the conditions that I think that can be considered here. So I think that, in my opinion, satisfies the burden of proof with respect to the public good and the area that surrounds it. But I think as far as the impact on the zone plan, I think it's important, a couple of things to mention as far as the zoning. While we are non-conforming with respect to use in the ARE2 zone, we are having the opportunity to provide for the township a conforming buffer, and we are eliminating substantially a non-conforming setback of the building, and we are also improving the traffic flow, as Mr. Ray testified earlier. In addition to the negative criteria, or in addition to the impact on the zone plan, I think the board has to consider the impacts on the master plan. And the master plan for the ARE2 zone and why those zones were put in place, the purpose of those zones are to, and this comes right out of the master plan, to minimize the impacts of development in areas located outside of centers, and to the preservation of rural and agricultural uses and preservation of rural character. And while that may certainly be the goal of the ARE2 zone, the subject property is not a rurally developed property. So I think when it talks about preserving the rural character, you're not achieving that on the subject property because it's already a pre-existing nonconformity. So while you're not achieving it, you're also not having a negative impact because you're not taking away any rural areas. It is what it is. It's an existing, pre-existing nonconformity. So I think we are not going to have a substantial detriment on that vision because we are not eliminating any rural areas that the ARE2 zone is seeking to preserve. We are actually bettering an existing area that's commercial to be more consistent with many of the visions and governances in your zoning ordinance. And we are also encouraging redevelopment and revitalization of a property that really could use some attention, which is a specific objective in the master plan. So with that being said, I think that this, if there ever was a case, if you wanted to present a textbook case on the balancing act that we have to do as planners, your planner is reviewing it, you as planners evaluating the case, and me as the planner presenting the case to the board, I think that this is a textbook case of a balancing act, of balancing what exists on the property today, how we can upgrade the property to be consistent with the master plan, and how we can take this opportunity to impose reasonable conditions to allow for a use that is thriving and not likely to end soon, to be blended more harmoniously with the zone plan and the environment, which is exactly the spirit of the Burbage case, which is the prevailing case governing expansion of non-conforming uses. So with that being said, Mr. Pape, I think I have, if you just indulge me to go through my notes for just a minute, or if you think I missed something on any of my points that we could go back to, but I think I talked about the fencing. I think that that concludes my direct, unless there's something that you feel as though I didn't hit or I need to go back over.
No, I think that you accurately restated the facts and thoroughly cited the applicable law. For the benefit of Mr. Tropoli, I'm going to ask, do you have the citation of the Burbage case that you could read onto the record? I know that that's beneficial to Mr. Tropoli. And we'll get it for him tomorrow.
Yes. It's Burbage v. Howell Township, 117 NJ.376.
I know it well, Mr. Pape.
I figured you did.
Very fine. And just one parenthetical comment. Maybe the planners are youngsters, but I was on the planet quite a while when that building was built. So, Mr. Chair, I have no further direct examination of Ms. Cafone, and she is now available to the board and the board's professionals.
Jennifer?
So, I mean, I think that was very thorough testimony. There's just one thing I want to correct. The buffer is not fully compliant because I think Charlie had indicated earlier this evening, there is still some utility connections through the buffer, correct, Charlie? The sewer connects the existing sewer, and then a proposed additional sewer line connects at the same location, but through that buffer.
Yeah,
Correct.
so the new lateral for the proposed addition does go through the buffer where the existing lateral for the existing building does exist. And then there's a small sliver of that existing warehouse that's on the site that's in the buffer.
So I don't disagree that the removal of, what did you say, about 500 square feet of the building is a benefit because that comes right out of the buffer, and there are a lot of positive attributes associated with what the applicant has stated they will be willing to do in terms of cleaning up the development that is in the environmentally sensitive areas, adjusting the design to have the loading, you know, kind of internal to the facility. I do agree that the architecture is a tremendous improvement over what is out there currently. And it's important to keep in mind, this is not a D1 use variance. As Ms. Cafone had stated, it's a D2 use variance. And in simple terms, the question becomes, can the site handle the increase that they're proposing? And you can impose these conditions as was cited, and that, you know, the betterments, I guess, as Ms. Cafone had put them, there's a number of them. So I do feel like the testimony was very comprehensive, and that, you know, the negative criteria is not, is there anything negative that happens, but is it substantially negative, and does the negative outweigh the positive? So they've, you know, in addition to all those items that Ms. Cafone cited, I think Mr. Pape also indicated that the applicant has extended the water main down to this property and had provided the ability, or I don't know if they provided it, or just the fact that it got extended provides the opportunity for hookup to municipal water instead of well water. And that the only perceived negative, in my opinion, would be any kind of traffic implication. And I think Mr. Ray had addressed that during his testimony. So, Mr. Chair, I'm satisfied that the applicant has provided the testimony to support the application.
Charlie?
The only comment that I'll have for the board is just a reminder that any testimony that's put on the record by the applicant, their professionals, any conditions they agree to get memorialized in a resolution should the board rule favorably. The applicant is bound by that, and any future owner of the property is bound by those conditions. So if they operate outside the conditions of those parameters, it becomes a code enforcement issue. And if they don't rectify it, they potentially have to come back to the board to rectify those issues. So not to say it's going to get to that point, but I just want to make it clear for the board, they agree to those conditions, those get put in a resolution that becomes permanent for the property in perpetuity.
I just want to remind the board also that this is a use variance. It's not final site plan or anything else.
Right. They would have to come back for a site plan if the board were to act favorably on the application.
Sure.
I also just want to reiterate that the use is there. It's legally existing. It's a non-conforming use, but they have COs, etc. So I don't want there to be any misunderstanding that if the board were to not act favorably, that this use goes away. The use does not go away. It's allowed to continue in its current condition. And none of the items that they have agreed to as conditions of approval would therefore be imposed on the site. So it's important to weigh what they're proposing and the items that they're conceding that they would comply with as part of any favorable outcome by the board. But should you not vote favorably, the use doesn't go away. It's allowed to continue to operate as it is today. So I just want to make that point very clear.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Pate?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our direct presentation. I do anticipate that there'll be questions and concerns brought to our attention by the public. I do not want to rest for this purpose. I anticipate there's the possibility of needing to recall the applicant's professionals or even to provide supplemental materials. So I do not wish to rest at this time, but that is the conclusion of our planned direct presentation, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Saya?
So before we open to public,
Yes.
I have one question for Charlie. Charlie, the sanitary lines that we talk about, the new and the connecting that go into the buffer area, they are documented on the ESRI, the GIS, underground utilities, etc.
Yeah, so it's an existing sanitary main that runs along the easterly property line on the neighbor's property. There is, I believe, a MRSA easement, for that line. The existing warehouse facility that's on the site is currently hooked up to that. With this expansion, that's going to necessitate a sanitary hookup, probably for bathrooms and the like. That connection runs along the east side of the existing building and crosses through the buffer in the vicinity, almost immediate vicinity of the existing lateral for the existing building. So it's not like they're, creating some additional disturbance. The straight line path for them to come out perpendicular and go right through the buffer to the main. I think the applicant has made some effort to run the main longer on their site to co-locate it with the existing lateral to try to minimize the disturbance and impact to the buffer, I guess, to the greatest extent practicable, but it's still technical disturbance of the buffer. It's below grade. Obviously, our ordinance doesn't permit any structures within the buffer, but that still does allow it the possibility to be planted once it's buried and backfilled and everything like that with landscape plantings.
Roger, Charlie. So then it'll be documented, it'll be recorded, etc.
Yeah, we can require them to provide an easement for the lateral, I guess, on their property, just so it can be maintained and in the future. Is that acceptable, Mr. Pate?
Surely. We can put an easement that runs to the benefit of the township that gives the township the right to inspect and also to impose restrictions on what goes on the surface.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Tropoli, at this time, we can open the public.
Yes, you can, Mr. Chair.
Okay, can I have a motion to open the public for questions and comments of the professional witnesses?
Mr. Chair, make a motion, to open the public.
Got a motion by Mr. Saya,
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
second by Mr. Mertens. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Eileen, at this time, we'll take questions and comments from the public.
At this point in time, the chairman has opened the hearing up to members of the public who have questions and comments. Once again, please use the raise your hand feature. We will announce you and bring you in one at a time. You will need to have audio and video capabilities. You will be sworn in. You will be required to give your name and address. And with that, we have just brought in Dave, excuse me if I'm not pronouncing your name. Eskenazi.
Yep. Hi.
Hi, Mr. Eskenazi, before you start, raise your right hand, please. Take the oath. You swear that the testimony you give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do, I swear. I'm not a professional on this, but I swear.
No, that's okay. That's fine. And sir, just for the record, if we can have your name and address, please.
Sure, it's David Eskenazi, 8 Michelle Boulevard, Howell, New Jersey.
You may proceed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My first question would go to Mr. Pape. Mr. Pape, you stated earlier that the water main that was brought into the building is a benefit to everyone. Are you aware that there's only one other property between the area where your client cut open the road for about 200 yards all the way to Moses Milch, that there's only one other property that's a horse farm, which I talked to them and they don't connect to it. They're on well and septic. And the entire road of Ramtown Greenville Road from Moses Milch all the way down to your client is ripped up and pretty battered. I've built a few businesses on my own. And in the past, I've had to place a bond to cover to make sure that these roads were corrected and fixed. So who's maintaining this? Who's correcting it? Who's going to repair or repave that whole entire stretch of roadway?
The first question that you asked was I aware of the number of property owners that are on the route? And the answer is no, I do not know the number of property owners. I do know that our client brought a water main and that the water main that was designed to bring firefighting water supply to the entire area, as well as water supply to the properties that are alongside of it. If the farm chose not to tie in, that's certainly their option. And as far as bonding, when the contractor installed the water line, they were required to post a bond, and that bond remains in place.
So who's going to be held responsible to repair that road? I mean, I have to drive back and forth on that road all the time. And half the people that drive on that road actually drive on the opposite side of the road because it is so bad.
I don't have an answer for you other than to tell you that a contractor was hired to put that water line in. The water line was put in with permits and a bond was posted with the municipality.
Okay, before I move on to that, I'd just like to note if the board does vote in favor for this, I'd like to have them follow up on the repair of that road.
Mr. Chair, if I could just interject, and I think it'll shed light on that for the record. So I have spoken with the Township Engineering Department with any type of main extension, regardless if it's this applicant or any other property owner. Anytime you do a road opening in the roadway, you're required to post a road opening permit. A main extension like this requires a requirement that they need to resurface the entire width of the roadway for the entire length of that trench. That's going to be a requirement before they close out that bond. My general understanding is that is pending, and it's anticipated that that will be completed before the end of July. Depending on the outcome of this application, whether this gets to a vote tonight and or does not get approved, that resurfacing, my understanding, would at the very least go to the easterly property line. if the application is to be approved, and then to, commence that remaining portion. If this application does get approved, they're doing some shoulder widening and things like that. I think, the township wants to have one complete pavement section across that whole width there. If it doesn't get denied, if it does get denied in that event, the roadway will get resurfaced all the way from Moslers Mills Drive all the way to the end of the main extension. And that'll, like I said, my understanding, that'll be completed before the end of July. There's certain things that have to go with a water main trench. Things have to be allowed to settle. You don't want to pave too early and then have a road that's settled, 2 or 3 inches. So that is something that's separate from this application. That's a requirement of their bond for the water main extension. That doesn't really have a bearing on this application at this point.
Okay, next I have Mr. Stefanski stated that his trucks start around 7 a.m. There's 3 schools here right on the block. We have Ramtown Elementary, Greenville Elementary, and Middle School South. My kids go to all 3 of the schools here. Schools start for Middle School South at 7 a.m. So we should limit the times that trucks are allowed to go after school starts and before middle school ends, stating that he says now that he has 3 trucks going through at a 17,000 square foot facility, which he's currently at. They're looking to expand this to a 47,000 square foot, so that's roughly 3 times the size. So doing simple business, if you're expanding your business footprint 3 times, then you're expanding your business input and output 3 times. So your 3 trucks now becomes 9 to 10 to 12 trucks that are now rolling through Ramtown Greenville Road, no longer 3 trucks. So to say that 3 trucks.
Yeah, the expansion of the building is 20,000 square feet. It's not the size that you quoted. And the operations testimony of Mr. Stefanski is not what you just quoted. Maybe your opinion, but it is not the statements that were made on the record as to how the additional area would be used. But the building is going from about 17,000 to about 38,000 square feet in total.
Okay, so 2.5 times instead of 3. Okay. But still, if you're increasing square footage, you're also increasing input output. That is the ultimate goal.
Mr. Stefanski actually testified exactly how his business operates. It's not as you stated, but that doesn't, your opinion is yours. It's just not consistent with Mr.
Okay, next. How can we ensure that deliveries come and go towards the south, towards County Line Road, and not north towards Newton's Corner Road? You stated earlier that Mr. Stefanski owns and operates his trucks. So can we put some kind of restriction that makes his trucks go south towards County Line Road, where the trucks have an easier access with traffic lights, wider roads, 2-lane roads, rather than a small local road where a lot of kids ride bikes? My worry is the 40, 50 kids that ride bikes up and down, back and forth from, as Mr. Ray put it, a collector roadway for Ramtown Greenville Road, is where all the kids actually collect and drive and ride their bikes. So they all ride their bikes back and forth with trucks running up and down that. We'd like to make sure that they push the trucks and vehicles going the opposite direction, away from all the children.
Mr. Stefanski did indicate that the majority of his trucks do go in that direction. Working with him, he told us between 90 and 95% of his trucks go in that direction. So if this board chose to fashion restrictions on turning movements, we would certainly be willing to work with them on that. We find it to be a reasonable requirement.
I think that would alleviate a lot of stress from a lot of people in the neighborhood that are watching, but not are on, that are not on here, but are watching. Everyone here is pretty nervous about all these trucks going up and down on Ramtown Greenville Road. There are already big trucks going in and out, and people take pictures and send them to me all the time because they know I'm not afraid to come up here and speak, but other people are. And that is a major concern for a lot of people in the neighborhood here. Second, sorry, I have a lot of notes from the last meeting I had to put to the side.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second? So are we conceding to a condition that restricts the movements, Mr. Pape?
Looking for the board to fashion with the applicant restrictions that they find to be appropriate.
So if the board were to, request that as a condition, there would be no objection on your part?
trucks exiting this property to go towards County Line Road as a restriction, we would accept that.
Mr. Chair, I think that that's actually a reasonable condition, and I think that's something that Charlie and I actually had talked about. Either it was today or last week, I forget. But I would recommend, if the board acts favorably on the application, that be a condition that the board impose on the applicant. I apologize for interrupting.
No, you're great. Actually, I love listening. Okay, all right. Next thing, Mr. Stefanski stated that he would turn off the beeping on the trucks that back up on Sunday mornings. Are you aware that DOT regulations don't allow you to turn that off? That's actually part of the truck. So all these 24 footers, I'm sure Chairman Nansen would confirm that beeping on the trucks do not shut off. There is no shut off switch on that. It's there as a safety regulation. So how can we require them again? Sundays, Mr. Stefanski said that he works. I myself work, till 2 in.the morning on Saturday nights. And at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to hear beeping. I'm after 5 hours of sleep. I live right behind the property here, and you can have trucks beeping all morning. That's not fair to the neighborhood that I just moved to 5 years ago, thinking that it was going to be a wooded area.
I would look to those with the expertise, but it has been explained to me that there are two methods of backup alarms. One is light and one is sound, and that you can, on private property, use the alternative system. And that was what Mr. Stefanski was testifying to.
All right. I own a couple of trucks. I've never heard of just a light backup.
Yeah.
It is OSHA approved.
I've done it on
Okay. So any way we can require that the board require that they use the light backup only and not the sound?
On Sundays, we'll agree to that, and we'll agree to be bound by the sound ordinance at all times. There's no relief from the sound ordinance.
Yep. Okay, next, refrigerated trucks. So refrigerated trucks are pretty loud. Any way we could have them not running all night long, instead have the produce or whatever frozen items that they have loaded in the morning instead of having loaded in the afternoon?
I don't have the answer to that. I'll have to get it from my client. So,
is Mr. Stefani in here?
let's see.
All right. Let's see. The bridge, I believe Chairman Nansen stated that it was 80,000 pounds.
If it's not posted,
posted.
If it's not posted, then there's a 80,000 pound, whatever the weight limit is.
All right. I know that bridge just washed away recently, and it took a long time to get the new one there, and we were landlocked here for quite some time. So if we can make sure that they don't exceed the weight limit of that bridge, or if we can find out what the weight limit is and have it posted to make sure that they don't exceed the weight limit.
Well, the thing about it is, if it's posted, there's a weight limit on the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a tonnage weight limit to cross a bridge, it's posted. If it's not posted, it's the regular statutory 80,000, whatever the GVW of the truck weight is what the posted weight is. If it's not posted.
Okay.
So if you got a triaxle truck and he's registered at 80,000 pounds, and there's not a sign on there stating, what the weight limit of the bridge is, then it's 80,000 pounds. And then if you got a truck that has a permit for 150,000 pounds, if it's not posted, he can go over that.
Okay. Another thing, I guess you conferred that they'll have to come back for you for site plan, because all these additional spots, according to the site plan that was just put up here on the page, there didn't really look like there was additional area for spots without having to exceed and go into the reserved area, or the nature area put off on the side. All right, and then lastly, Ms. Confone, She spoke very eloquently and done her job very nice to shine light and make it sound, positive. But for the last 50 years, this building was strictly a storage building. It was a storage building for a book publishing company. It was a storage company for a garage door company. It was a warehouse for this. It was a warehouse for that. It was never a distribution center. Even though you've given them a CO to operate now as a distribution center, it doesn't mean that it makes it the right location for that business. So I implore you to vote this down, to have them build this in a more appropriate location where bigger roads and accessible roads are more in favor for that type of a business. You don't see too many distribution centers in a small community all surrounded by houses. They're always closer to main roads or right off of a main road. That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Next week,
I would just like to respond to the last deal. If the board, which I'm not saying the board is going to approve this or disapprove it, but Jennifer had stated earlier, I want the public to understand this. This use is not going to go away. It's just going to stay the same that it is in the environmentally restricted. There's not really going to be any change to anything that's there. They're going to stay in the environmental sensitive areas and operate as they are right now. So I want the public to understand that we've got to kind of look at the overall picture here. So, hey, Eileen.
next we will have Joan Osborne brought into the hearing. And can you move him back out? Where is she?
Yeah.
I don't know why she's not. We're going to try Michael Bernstein. Mr. Bernstein, can you turn on your audio and video? There you go.
Okay, Mr. Bernstein, would you raise your right hand, please? You swear the testimony you give tonight will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
And may we have your name, please, and your address?
My name is Michael Bernstein. I live at 3 Colleen Court, Howell, New Jersey, 07731.
Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for taking the time. I've lived here for 17 years, and with all respect to all of the professionals that are spoken, none of you have been here for 17 years. You might be familiar with the area, but you have absolutely not mentioned a lot of things that are very, very important that must be considered, and it's the reason that you have to vote no for this project. Chairman, with all due respect, okay, you're saying that it's still going to be there, whether you approve this or not. Well, here is the problem, Mr. Chairman. It's going to change immensely. It might be the same. There's just going to be a lot more of it. And quite frankly, the roads that you want to do it on cannot handle this. The traffic engineer is wrong. He is way wrong. My development is right on the corner of the four-way stop of Lakewood Ellenwood Road and Newton's Corner Road. In the past 2 years, the amount of trucks that are now on those roads going through that intersection, coming down Ramtown Greenville Road, is far more than what was counted. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. Okay, I'm not saying that you lied, Mr. Ray. I'm not saying that, but living here and watching this, it's far more than that. You can't make a left from Rantown Greenville Road onto Newton's Corner Road. You can't do it for the best parts of the morning and the best parts of the afternoon. It's just not possible. It just isn't, okay? We can't support this. The rural character of that area provides for a lot of different things. There are a lot of kids that are riding their bikes on there, but there's also a lot. We have bike riding clubs in here and they use these roads. You'll see packs of them, 10, 15, 20 of them riding on these roads. That was not mentioned. What was not mentioned was there's the fact of the 3 schools. The gentleman that was just speaking before, he brought it up. That was not mentioned. And Mr. Pape, I thank you for the history of the property. It may have been built in 1960, but like the gentleman said before, none of that was warehouse and distribution. Precision Door is a garage door company. They installed doors, okay? Howell Heating and Cooling was an HVAC company. They ran around fixing people's air conditioners, replacing systems. They weren't warehouse and distribution centers. It just wasn't that. There was a cabinet maker in there. They weren't distributing them. They made them, okay? There was a lot of, there were businesses in there. Now, this may have opened up in 1960, and the reason that it hasn't changed is because it can't. It's not conforming. It doesn't fit into what the area is zoned for. Nowhere does it say in agricultural that warehousing is part of it. It's not allowed, okay? It's just not supposed to be there. All these companies, they moved out of there because they couldn't get bigger there, and they sought out other locations. Precision's a big place now. Howell Heating and Cool's a big place, a big company now, because they couldn't get any bigger there, because you could not change the property because it wasn't allowed. This can't be voted for. That's why the property has not changed. And I would also like to tell you that since this place was owned, you know, it's changed over in the past couple of years, that property looks really, really bad right now. And you're expecting all of us to believe that the new owners are magically going to do everything that they're saying they're going to do. But then they don't. And we're stuck with it. Also, the professional planner, she said flat out that the benefits far outweigh the negatives. They don't. There is absolutely no benefit to anyone that lives within 5 miles of this project. None. So they're going to replace and they're going to remediate some things. That's great. And you're going to plant some things. Like, are we going there for picnics? Am I going to go to a dog park over there? I mean, there's no benefit for us. None. It is all a detriment to this part of this town. We can't fit it. We can't handle it. And to allow a project like this, I understand they're going to say there's going to be this many trucks. Okay, come on, guys. We all make money. You all know there's going to be more than that. Okay, it's just the way that it's going to be. All right, it's just the way that it's going to be. And it's going to be competing with a whole bunch of trucks that are already there now. It's terrible. You cannot allow this. And I also have a couple of questions, very simple ones. I was looking at your site plan. Trucks, they're going to struggle to make that turn. They're going to have to come over the yellow line. There's just no way. Okay, they're going to have to come over the yellow line. When tractor trailers go in there, they're going to come over the divider. What school bus are they going to run into? It's just that simple. There's just too many. And there's one other little problem that you have. You want to send them all south to County Line Road? You got 2 temples over there. They don't drive to, they walk. And they don't walk on the sidewalks because there aren't any. They're walking out into the street. How many of them are going to get hit? And at what point is that town going to say, okay, enough with the trucks, send them back your way? When does the fight end? This project can't be approved. But I have a question about on the site plan. I was looking at it and I was doing some quick cursory math. And it just seems like they are really, really increasing the impervious ground cover over there. And they put a couple of retention basins there. Great. But the square footage of those retention basins don't seem big enough to catch an inch an hour or an inch of water on the whole property. They're not going to catch it. Nobody said anything about what happens when those retention basins overflow. Because that's not going to catch it. That's not going to be big enough. It's just not. And that driveway is a ramp. That driveway, you're going uphill. The amount of water that's going to wash down that driveway right into Ramptown Greenville Road, there's nothing in your plan that's going to talk about where the water's going to go once it hits Ramptown Greenville Road. It's all downhill. Can't happen. You can't have this. So for the traffic concerns, the safety concerns, and there's also one other thing, whether something is conforming or not, even if it is 100% conforming, if it's not safe, you as a board have the right to vote no. We are all asking you to vote no for this. This is not a project that will help Ramptown in any way whatsoever. Thank you for your time.
Eileen?
I can't hear you, Eileen. You're on mute.
No, because Joan's there. So yeah. Joan, do you have audio and video? Are you with us now?
I have both, yes.
Okay, we don't see you. We can hear
Excuse me,
you.
can someone just answer my question? I'm sorry to interrupt. About the impervious ground coverage versus those storm drains?
Okay, Charlie, I'm going to go to my engineer. It hasn't been designed, by the way, Mr. Bernstein. This is, they did the conceptuals. This is what they're going to design to handle the water. I'm going to let Charlie jump in.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I can just elaborate on this. So typically for use variance applications, a lot of times what you'll see applicants come in with is a one-page site plan showing their site layout of what they want and coming for board approval. You know, I requested that the applicant submit a detailed drainage design for the stormwater management infrastructure on the site to make sure that what was being presented to the board is accurately sized and in accordance with the stormwater management rules that are in place with the township and then also with DEP. So what you're seeing as far as the drainage layout for those three basins, in my professional opinion, from what they presented to me, is an adequate size for what's being proposed on the site in terms of impervious coverage. Now, as far as the grading of the parking area and things like that, that needs to be clarified a little bit greater if the board does rule favorably and this does get to a site plan application. If there's concerns about water running down the site driveway onto the public right of way, they do have a number of stormwater management inlets along the west side of their driveway. At site plan, we can also require them to put in trench drains along the site driveway to make sure that all runoff from the site is captured by their stormwater management system and then into the stormwater management basins that they're proposing. And to that same point, they are proposing a stormwater management base. So all their basins are linked to each other, and they all drain to the one at the I guess the west of the site entrance, which has an outlet control structure. In some applications, you'll see applicants just discharge to grade with a flared end section with riprap that then overlands float onto the public right of way. This applicant is actually tying into the existing stormwater conveyance system in Ramptown Greenville Road, which discharges directly to Muddy Ford Brook by the way of a flared end section. So their runoff, not only are they proposing to detain all the impervious coverage on their property and meet the stormwater management regulations, any overflow is then directed into a conveyance system and directly piped to the Muddy Ford Brook. So you shouldn't have any overflow unless it's an extreme emergency situation, 100-year storm and above, which you're not required to do per the stormwater management regulations. Everything will be directed as an overflow to that flared end section. So in my professional opinion, from what I've been presented, what they're proposing on the site with all the reports and numbers they provided me is adequately sized for what's being proposed. Not just for the proposed addition, they're also managing stormwater runoff for that existing building. And I wouldn't be comfortable, and this board, you know, I take stormwater management very seriously. Anytime I have concerns, I tell the board, I tell the applicant, they're not even ready to be scheduled for the board. So if we weren't at this point, it wouldn't be, you know, the level of comfortability from my end, from an engineering perspective, that they'd be before you. So
I thank you for that explanation. I heard you mention 100-year storm. We seem to get those like every 6 months now. You understand that? Okay, so in my non-professional opinion, having been doing this type of stuff for a very, very long time, it's not enough. And to sit here and impose this on us, the residents, and vote yes and approve this on an idea when it's going to have this great of an impact on that area is a huge mistake. That being said, I am asking you all as a gentleman, as a longtime resident, somebody who cares about this town, please vote no for this because there is nothing of any value for this area for us. The negatives are far greater than the positives. The risks are too many to mention, just too many. Please consider all of that. Thank you very much.
Eileen?
Okay, we have Joan Osborne here.
Joan, will you raise your right hand, please? And we'll swear you in. Joan, you swear that the testimony you give tonight will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, self you got.
I do.
And your name, please, and your address for the record.
Joan Osborne, 28 Bronia Street, Howell, New Jersey.
Go ahead.
I have a couple questions. I don't want to repeat what the prior two citizens did so well laying out, but the first question is the existing use. Was the work done on the water main done so that they could get the permit to continue to do what they were doing there?
No, the work was done so that they could bring in a firefighting water supply there, but it was their decision. It was not imposed on them.
Okay, so you would have the permit to continue those uses even without it. So you spent the money in anticipation of getting an approval, or it's related to the existing use?
No, I think Ms. Cafone accurately stated it. Our clients got their CO in 2018, shortly after they purchased it. The water line was recently installed. They did the water line installation. It's a substantial expense. They didn't ask anybody for credit for it. What Ms. Cafone pointed out was it's evidence that they are there to stay. They're not leaving.
And I understand that they will be there regardless of whether they get approved to expand. But so your testimony is, or the fact is that the water main extension was put in anticipation of staying there and expanding their use?
No, it was put there to have a firefighting water supply to the building.
Okay, so it's unrelated to this application?
It's unrelated to this app. It's done. It's completely.
I understand. Okay.
Well done.
So that part of it is not done as an intent to benefit the community. It was an intent to benefit the user of the building in their existing use.
I wouldn't say it was that selfish, but you could.
Okay. Now, and this is a general question for the board. If this non-conforming use is permitted to be expanded, there are several farms in the area and agricultural uses. If those owners were to sell their properties and then have someone else come in and want to do a similar type of business, would the existence of this and this approval be used by them to say, well, the character of the area has changed because there's other non-conforming uses that have been approved, you should also approve me?
Ms. Osborne, quite frankly, it's really not appropriate to ask the board questions. This is your time to ask the board's applicant and their professionals their opinion. The board will have the opportunity to weigh in later on their decision, but I'm going to request that the question that you've answered be directed either to either be directed to Mr. Pape or one of his professionals, but I'm going to determine that it's not appropriate to poll the board on your question.
Okay, I will ask Mr. Pape that question or his professional planner.
Sure. Well, I mean, as Mr. Tropoli, as the board's attorney, may at some time put on the record, but each and every case for use variance relief stands on its own record, that precedents are not created by the granting of relief for one applicant. So in my opinion, as a land use attorney for the past 41 years, my opinion is I've never seen a zoning board state, well, because we gave it to someone next door, we have to give it to you. Yeah, each and every application, you have to earn it.
Right, and I understand that proposition, but isn't it relevant to the consideration? And isn't it an argument that planning attorneys such as yourself representing clients often make, is that the character of the area and the existence of other non-conforming similar uses weigh to the benefit of someone making another application, that it helps change the character of the area when you allow one thing and someone else comes in with a similar idea, it's harder to say no to it. Isn't that accurate?
I think that's just way too broad to say yes to. I mean, each and every time you approach a zoning board of adjustment, you're responsible for going through all the proofs that Christine Cafone did. So I'd stay with that as the answer.
Okay. Now, I think there was testimony by the planner that there's a potential, if this property is in fact sold and not just staying there, if they don't get their approvals, that other conforming uses could be worse. And my question on that, which of the conforming uses would potentially be a greater traffic or a greater traffic problem if it was permitted?
Okay. I don't recall that testimony at all. The only comparison testimony that I know that Mr. Ray indicated that he looked at the published traffic records associated with this type of use and ignored the limitations that the applicant agreed to, ignored those limitations and said, if this were to be in the general public, here's what the ITE manual says would happen with traffic, and then indicated that that traffic would still be handled by the road system. Christine Cafone just confirmed that she made no such comparison statements.
Okay. Well, would any of your experts be able to state whether permitted uses for this zone would be less intensive than what is being proposed here with the amount of traffic?
That is not that's not testimony that's offered by the applicant to the board. We did not do a comparison of permitted uses. We discussed the existing conditions and ways to make them better for the community, but we did not indicate that we're better than the permitted uses.
Okay.
For a clean slate, it would be a different story.
Right. And my last statement is just a comment that it's my understanding that when you create zoning restrictions and permitted uses, and that there are non-conforming uses in the area, that you indulge the pre-existing grandfathered use, but you generally don't try to allow it to expand. And I would ask, for the benefit of the people who live there, it is very much an agricultural real estate zone. There's not a ton of non-conforming businesses in that area. And there are schools there. There's a lot of children going to use the schools to play at, to go to school at. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic in the area, and having a warehouse type facility in the area would just change the character. So I would ask that you not approve this application.
Thank you. Eileen?
Okay, next we have Jack Elbrick.
Hello.
Howdy. Mr. Tropley? Mr. Tropley?
Wait a minute, got it. Okay, Jack, would you raise your right hand, please?
He disappeared.
Okay. There he is.
There you
Mr. Albrecht, hi. Raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you give tonight will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And may we have your name on the record and your address, please?
My name is John Elbrecht Jr., and I live at 10 Michelle Boulevard in Howell, New Jersey, 07731.
Thank you. You may proceed.
I live with my wife directly behind the existing structure right now, and we're going to meet halfway into the woods here. Now, no one has, from any point of any viewpoint across the board, talked about the neighborhood directly behind this building. Now, I'm speaking for myself, probably speaking for some of my neighbors. Now, we have not been approached about lighting, noise, operation of on Sunday, what's the exact hours it's going to be. We have not been spoken to about how the retention basin is going to be taken care of. Is it going to be sprayed for mosquitoes? There's deer that go through there. There's fox dens. There's turtles back there. There's owls. I mean, there's so much back there. So you're going to push that onto our neighborhood. I'm out there spraying every other day trying to keep our trees or what we have now in bushes. It's crazy at this point. So you can push that all along here. So we need to work together. I mean, I understand the way of business. I work in a business, and you kind of work with your neighbors. But to this point, there's been no work together. All I hear is about Ramtown, Greenville Road, traffic plans, but nothing about talking about our neighborhood behind here. We all have the American dream. I know Mr. Stefanski had the American dream, but we all did too. That's why we moved to Ramtown. It's a beautiful little town. It's a community. We didn't live to have a 30,000 square foot warehouse put right behind. Well, by the way, I can see the light right now through my sunroom window, and I can see the light in the back edge of that building right now. It's there. So you can tell me the other lighting's not going to be coming down. I'm going to try to sleep at night. What about noise? Come on, we have to sit there and think about this. We are taxpayers. Spend over $15,000 to live in Howell each year, paying taxes. And no one has spoken beyond for us as property owners. I understand commercial. I understand growth. I understand New Jersey. But we have to work together as neighbors. So the board, I'm asking you to please think about that. And one more thing I'd like to comment about, and I know what the lawyer was saying, and I respect that. My comment is to everybody here. If you open up Pandora's box, what's going to go on up and down the street here? What's going to go up the street towards where Sabas is? That's commercial property. I see signs right there. They want to build housing. There's housing going across the street from our development here now. And somebody bought the 20 acres right next to us. So what are we going to do with all these kids? What are we going to do to be able to walk around and enjoy our community? Because I don't think the board members, and I don't think Mr. Stefanski will be walking around our neighborhood and enjoying what we have here. It's a great neighborhood. It's a beautiful place. Many people move from many locations to come here to enjoy this. So I ask for those to be addressed, and I ask to be a good neighbor to work with our neighbors. And board, please think about that. If you had a warehouse behind you, how would you feel? So thank you. I appreciate it. That's my final thought.
Mr. Pape, do you have any comment for John?
Only to say that we did talk about lighting, and we did talk about sound, and we did talk about buffers, and all of those would be developed with the board at site plan. But we have not, your ordinances forbid light spillage. We indicated that our light system would be compliant. And your ordinances, you have sound ordinances that we are required to address. We responded to the specific questions about backup beepers. And at the time of a site plan, we would go into all of those factors in depth.
Well, my follow-up on that, Mr. Pape, is that I'm watching lighting right here coming right now. I'm at my kitchen table. I can see lighting coming off the building. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, well, you're seeing light from a building that was approved some 61 years ago. We're making a commitment to bring the entire site into conformance with the township's current 2021 ordinance.
Well, 30,000 square foot, we'll have to see.
Eileen?
We
Just
now
Joe.
have Joe. We don't know Joe's last name, so Joe is coming into the meeting.
Okay. And I'm going to make an announcement. It's now 10:05. We're going to go to 10:15. You know, Mr. Pape, we're going to have to bring everybody back and finish the public comment and questions.
Okay, Joe, can you raise your right hand, please, and take the oath? You swear the testimony you're giving this evening to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And may we have your last name, sir, and your address as well?
Yep, my last name is Mauer, and I live at 31 Michelle Boulevard.
Could you spell your name, sir?
Mauer, M-A-U-E-R.
Very well, thank you.
So, one question that's really sticking out to me is I keep hearing, well, at first it started out as no semi trucks. Then it went to 1. Now it's 2 with the possibility of 3. Say there's restrictions to 3. They sign, they get the building built. Next week they want 5. They want 10 a month from now. Who's going to enforce that restriction that was applied on this regulation here?
Mr. Pape?
I would anticipate that all regulations are enforced by the zoning officer and primarily based on what is reported to the zoning officer by the community. So that would be my expectation as to how Howell would handle it.
Okay, so we're relying on a code enforcement basically?
That is the system that's in place.
Okay, all right. And we have, like everyone else has said, we have the 3 schools there, tons of kids around. What happens in the event that some big emergency at the school and you need access from that road? Now we got an 18-wheeler blocking the road. Say he breaks down or he's backing up. How are we going to get into the school with emergency vehicles then?
Mr. Mauer, in the questions of what if there's an emergency, and what if there's a tractor trailer, and what if it broke down, and what if it was blocking the road? In the game of what if, you can always create a set of questions that cannot be responded to. But if you're dealing with anticipated movements of 2 or 3 tractor trailers coming to this site, I would say that none of those are reasonable projections.
They're not reasonable, but they're absolute possibilities. Just because you can't give an answer to a what if doesn't mean it can't happen. My kids go to school there. I live here. You don't. None of the professionals on this meeting don't live here. They don't have to see what's going to go on here, but we all do. Okay. So just because there's a what if doesn't mean that it can't happen. There's tons of different scenarios that can happen. Sure. Maybe they don't. But for a town that prides itself on security and safety of our schools, and this police department's response to the security of our children in these schools, that's definitely a huge consideration that should be taken into account.
And we have, and if I may, as a resident of the community, your sharing your position with the board is as valuable to the board as it is to the applicant. And there's a lot of respect for everyone who is speaking. The question that you asked of us is one that you can't reasonably project and have an answer for. But
sure, I get that. Okay, so then I guess the rest of it will just be comments rather than questions. But a huge thing is, what is the point of having zoning if it's just going to be ignored? This is supposed to be, this is ARE2. This is agricultural rural. I mean, now we're bringing in commercial, and I know the setting of precedents. You're saying it can't be applied, but a lawyer as yourself, of course, you're going to come to an argument for a new application using that. So we have the horse farm next door that potentially could get sold. As John mentioned, we have the 20 acres that just got sold in front of Dave's house. So now he's sandwiched in between those 20 acres that now potentially can turn into commercial, because when they apply for a variance or commercial usage, you're going to say, well, you granted it for 366 Ramtown Road. So why am I being subjected to, I can't pass it. So now we have that. And then we have the one commercial property up the street, which has been there. I heard comments saying that there was already commercial properties on Ramtown Greenville Road. It's only one right now, besides 366, and it's a landscaping company. It's really not a problem. They have F-150s and F-250s, no 18-wheelers. And, you know, we have, like Jack was saying, the wildlife back there. We have endangered species of plants back there that I'm the HOA president for Michelle Boulevard. We're going through massive problems with our drainage basin. This is going on 6 years now. We've been fighting with the DEP state and federal level because of this one flower that's back there. So, you know, there's got to be something about that as well. And as far as access goes with this road, yeah, you're saying that we can probably push them south onto county line, but don't forget, on the other side of Western Drive over there is prime access to the Garden State Parkway. Of course, they're going to try to go over there. That's a hot road right there. All right. So then we have that. We have, you know, as everyone has said, we got kids everywhere riding bikes. What happens if something spills in the roadway? I know these basins, they're going to be made to filter out whatever that's got to filter out from the on-site. But if we have spills from Rantown Greenville Road, as the trucks are coming in, those spills aren't going into those basins. They're going right into the brook where the bridge collapsed. All right. So, you know, I urge the zoning board really to think about this. You know, we live in a great community. You know, and I just don't want different sets of rules for commercial properties than residential. If I wanted to put a pool filter within 10 feet of the property, then I have to get signatures from all my neighbors. I don't see these guys knocking on doors looking for signatures. You know, as a matter of fact, I even wanted to put up a 2-foot Intex pool for my kids last year, and I have code enforcement knocking on my door, having me get permits. But we're going to change zoning for almost a 40,000 square foot warehouse. So I really urge the board to think twice on this. You know, just think, if you were living here, how would you feel? Thank you.
Thank you. Eileen?
Next, we have Rich Lanza.
Okay, Rich, would you raise your right hand, please? You swear the testimony you give tonight will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And please state your name and may we have your address, please.
Yep. My name is Rich Lanza. My address is 44 Michelle Boulevard, Howell, New Jersey.
Go ahead, sir.
So I'm just going to jump on one of Joe's points that he just brought up about emergency response and the scenario of what ifs. Well, if you go back this year, the school year, Greenville had a silent alarm go off with massive police response. They didn't know what was going on. So it's not a what if scenario. It does happen. Unfortunately, the world we live in, we need to make sure that we're prepared for that and the kids can get the proper response that's needed. On top of that, outside of police response at just the schools, we're talking about any type of emergency response with whether it's fire, medical, not even just the schools, but we talk about all the residents around here. You know, every second matters when there is an emergency. So when a tractor trailer is in the middle of the road and trying to pull into this sort of tight driveway that's being proposed, and a fire truck or an ambulance is trying to get down there and this truck is over the yellow line because they're pulling in, you know, that could definitely affect a resident or a response to the school. So again, I think, you know, the board really needs to think through this and vote this down. It just doesn't make sense for this area. It doesn't make sense to build this warehouse next to 3 schools. So, no, it's pretty much common sense that it just doesn't fit in this area. So I'm going to urge the board to vote this down.
Thank you. Eileen?
And next we have Penny. Penny, can you please put on your audio and video?
Unmute.
Hi.
Am I on?
You are. Penny, can
Am I
you
on?
raise?
Oh, yes.
Hi there. Raise your right hand You swear that the testimony you give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, babe. We have your last name, Penny?
Okay, my first name is actually Pamela.
Oh, okay.
Nickname is Penny, but last name is Noumair, Noumair.
Okay, and your address, please?
141 Arnold Boulevard, Howell, New Jersey.
All right, go ahead.
All right. First of all, my computer keeps going on and off. I don't know why. So I hope I don't lose you. But they're neglecting the fact that I live on Arnold Boulevard, and there are school buses that come through here all different times of the day. Not just in the morning and in the afternoon. We have school buses with names that I can't read because they're from Lakewood. They go up and down this road all the time. They go over to the corner of Brook Road and Oak Tavern. Not only that, but having more trucks on the road will be more dangerous. We have walkers on our road now at all different times, at night and during the day, and they walk with their kids. We now have, you cannot get, the board is going to be stopping traffic going over to Highway 9 where the major businesses are. It's hard to get over there now. When I get over to Randolph Road and to Squonkam Road, those trucks are going to be coming down through there. There shouldn't be any more big commercial sites in this corner because you're going to be stopping Newton's Corner Road, you're going to be stopping Park Place, you're going to be stopping all the residents in this whole corner from going over to Highway 9, because the only way to get over there is going to be going back up Squonkam Road, which you won't even be able to travel on with all the trucks. We went through this a little while ago with Amazon coming here in the neighborhood. So now it's the exact same situation as when Amazon was trying to build their site here. We're going to have all this traffic. And believe me, I live on the road. I see the trucks. They go barreling down this road. The big trucks do. My neighbor's been trying to get big trucks, 13-wheelers and all them out of here for years. He hasn't been able to stop that. It shouldn't be on Arnold Boulevard. The corner gets busy at different times. I don't know where they get their information. Yeah, it looks like a simple little thing on Ramtown Greenville Road, but it's not. This is going to impact the roads around here, the traffic, the commercial people that will not be able to get over to Highway 9 because the trucks are not going to come up New Hampshire Road and take Ridge Road here to this site. And they have to come down Arnold Boulevard, or they have to go through the other Newton's Corner Road development where kids ride their bikes, they cross the roads, there's sidewalks there, but it's still a lot of pedestrian, shopping area for kids. They walk to those stores from these developments. And now we're going to be having more trucks come in. I'm asking the board to refuse this, to not even think about it. I mean, there's so many things that were said tonight, like they go back to how many years ago this was here. I mean, I have all these notes that are scribbled here and there as I was listening, like no CCO on some of the buildings, on some of the prior ones. Well, that means that things weren't even approved and things were done. And also, if you go back, they talk about you know, what was there in the past, and now it should be approved. Well, what happens if there was a nuclear site or a dump site there in the past? Does that mean it's going to be approved now? Is that the way we think? We go back to history and say, oh, well, it was approved 20, 50 years ago, but now, yeah, we'll approve it again because it was there in the past. I mean, a lot of the arguments and a lot of the traffic things, we're not considering Arnold Boulevard, we're not considering the traffic that goes through here, the corners that get backed up in the morning, you know, Randolph Road, Brook Road, they're always packed up, and it's always hard because you've got drivers who don't pay attention and they're not putting on their signals, they're turning right. And I do have people speeding up and down this road all the time. So it's going to be creating a big problem. And the warehouse distribution was just a storage place. Wasn't a distribution center. Now it's going to be a distribution center. You're changing the whole thing. You're letting everything go by, you know, and no deliveries between this time and after that time. You know how hard that's going to be, keeping up all this and having the police there to watch all this kind of stuff. You know, it doesn't sound reasonable to me at all. None of it. You know, it's very upsetting, you know, and the water and the bridge, I know the bridge was redone, but that whole area overflows. And the brook that's there, doesn't it supply water to other townships? And now we're going to have more. You know, and as far as the schools and the kids, what they were stating, I can testify that we have all sorts of school buses going up and down the road all day long. So, I mean, you can have the police sit at the corner and watch. I'm asking you to, you know, not accept this at all, not approve it.
Thank you, Penny.
Okay, we have
I
one.
can't hear you.
I said
I
thank
can't hear you.
Penny.
The chairman said
If
thank
someone's
you.
good-
Penny.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for your comments.
We have one more
I
member.
know I'm sorry, I know I sound upset, and I am, because there were so many things that were brought up that were so superficial and not really dealing with the things, you know, talking about past things and everything. You know, today is today, and this is a residential neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
And I even think the zoning board, when we have new developments, should put in a playground for each of the new developments. There's so many kids with COVID and problems developing.
Okay.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, ma'am. Eileen, you want to
We have
bring in?
one more member of the public that had their hand up. His name is Michael
All right.
Andrew. He's in the meeting.
Okay,
Go ahead, Michael.
Good evening, board. I welcome
Before-
your,
But there you go. Okay, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
yes, sir.
And state your name, please, and give us your address.
My name is Michael Andriola. My address is 48 Michelle Boulevard, Howell, New Jersey, 07731.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir, for your time. Thank you, board, for your attention to this matter. I'm a CPA by trade. I do a lot of public presentations for boards and councils, so I know it's a lot of dedicated, donated time, and I promise to not waste your time, and I'll keep it short and sweet. In this regard, it comes down to one thing. Your decision is going to make a very impactful resolution to how Ramtown is going to be now and going forward. I moved here from Union, New Jersey about 6 years ago. My children attend the local schools. I moved out of a suburb to come down here with a little more space, a little more room, a little more of ability to raise my family without having to deal with the congestion of, being close to a city. If you wanted this to be a distribution center, well, I never would have signed up for that. We have the ability today to make a decision as to whether or not we want to keep the integrity of this community. You have developments going up all over the place. This is a family place. We have schools down the street, kids riding their bikes, very family oriented. You're going to bring a distribution center into the middle of that. I mean, Howell is huge. We have Route 9. We have plenty of zones where there are factories and businesses and other ways to create ratables for our taxes. We don't need to bring a distribution center into Ramtown, New Jersey. So your decision is either going to keep the integrity of our community as the way we know it, or your decision is going to destroy all the years of upbringing and family commitment and the community that we know it. So it's on your plate. I'd hope you'd want to encourage more families to come to the area and have more children and that type of development. We have a lot of new developments coming up, and we have had a lot of new developments that went into the area. If you choose to change that and bring commercial business into the area, well, so be it. You left your mark on the town. But I hope you make the right decision and keep the integrity of the family and the upbringing that we have here, and not destroy what we've kind of, you know, brought to the table. Because if you bring a distribution here, a lot of people are going to leave. And, you know, maybe it's not significant for the overall good of the town, but it's significant for us and our families and what we thought we were buying into as having that, you know, good town feel, strong relationship, good schools, good community, and it's on your shoulders. You can vote one way or the other. I just hope you make the right decision. And that's really all I have to say.
I'm gonna answer your question. As far as bringing the distribution there, we're not doing that. It's there. We're not gonna change that. Regardless if we vote for the expansion or not, it's still gonna be there. But it's gonna stay looking like it is. And, you know, they can use the areas that they're using. You know, the fenced in area, all of the areas that's in the wetlands, the areas that have been previously used, they're going to be allowed to use that. The gravel area, there's nothing we can do to change that. The sensitive areas that are being, where it's been there for years, we can't change that. If we deny, I'm just giving you the forefront. It's there. Regardless, they don't have to expand the building, but they can use that as a distribution center. There's nothing we can do to change that. What we could do is take what we got now and plan it to where they get everything out of the environmental sensitive areas. The only thing that they're going to be in is in the second 150-foot riparian buffer section, which they have to go through the DEP and, you know, through the state on anyway to get permission to do that. The state could say, no, you can't do that. But they've been in contact. The applicant has been in contact with the state, and the state is pretty favorable about doing that. But you got to look at the whole thing coming from where the existing driveway is now. If we deny this application, and I'm not saying we're going to approve this application, don't get me wrong. But I'm just letting you know, everybody has made the statement that we're bringing that to there. We're not. It's there. It's nothing we can do to change that. That will stay there forever if they so choose to. You know, that's what I'm saying. What we're looking at is the board, and what the board's professionals have done was meet with the application. You saw the picture up there of, you could see the existing road and then where they were putting the detention basins and everything. Right now, everything on that site runs right straight to the brook. There's no, if there's contaminants, whatever's there, it's going to the brook. What can this board do? We can't change that it's there. That's going to consistently, if we deny it, it's going to consistently run in the brook, and there's nothing we can do. They do not have to meet the standard water quality as it is today. But if we go through an application process, we can hold their feet to the fire that they have to deal with that. That's you got to look at what we have to do. You know, but I just want you to understand the distribution is there and it's not going nowhere. Right. So, you know, we can either make it better, make the site better to where it's presentable. But the thing about it is, what they're putting on the record, it becomes a code enforcement. And I know Mr. Howard very well. I've known him for many years dealing with him. If it's in a resolution, right now they don't have a resolution. There's no compliance that our code enforcement can really go there and say, okay, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't. There's not, because it's been there so long. What we can do, once we have a resolution, they can hold their feet to the fire. And I mean, you know, the applicant has stated 3 trucks, 3 tractor trailers, and they're going to try to limit it to certain times and the turn movements, you know, to certain ways. They're bound by that. if they go beyond, code enforcement will go out there, they'll shut it down. You know, I want the public to understand that. I mean, it's not that this board is bringing something that's already existing there. It's already existing. We got to try to make it better for the community is what we've got to try to do. And it's, you know, I hate to be put in that type of position, but that's what the board's for. And I mean, we have to look at it. It's just not a cut no or yes. Or if this was a new application coming in, they're going to have a hard time getting approvals in here. You're stating with the 20 acres there, that's a ARE2 zone. Okay, they're going to have very difficult time getting approvals for a new thing. This is an existing. This predated the ARE2 zoning. You know, back to 1931. You know, it predated any of our ordinances, any of our zoning laws. And that's what I'm saying. We're trying to bring it into compliance because we're stuck with it. And so, you know, we could either be stuck with a good project where everything's cleaned up, they're out of the environmental sensitive areas, totally out of that, except that one little section in the riparian buffer. All of the water discharge is contained on site. It's not just free running, you know, through that. You got to look at the environmental aspect too, also. You know, I hate to get on my soapbox like that, but the board, you know, it's not just a simple denial, you know, that it's there. That's all I can say. And I'm sorry to, but I just wanted to reiterate that people don't understand that, you know, it's there. There's nothing we can do with this site. Any other site, yeah, they would have to come to the zoning board, and trust me, they're going to have a very hard time getting something approved in an ARE2 zone. You know, it's really very difficult. So, you know,
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate all that information. I appreciate your candor, and I believe you. I think your heart's in the right place. And I know from a very realistic standpoint, we can make this easy or we can make this difficult. And I know that there's gray and there's black and white. And when I moved down to this neighborhood, it was zoned the same way that it is zoned now, 6 years later. And we don't have the tractor trailer traffic because they haven't really improved or expanded on the footprint. So the conditions that we made decisions in order to locate to this area, we want to be the same as the conditions that are in place right now. And we have two decisions. We can make it very easy for them, or we can make it difficult. And I'm just hoping that you keep the integrity of our area in mind when you make your decisions, to not let them force our hand and make things any easier than it needs to be.
I can appreciate that, but I just want you to understand, they can bring tractor trailers in there right now. And I know the movement's going to be difficult. It's going to actually be more difficult getting in and out of there off of Greenville Road without the improvements, but they can do it. They're allowed. There's nothing in our ordinances that can stop them. And that's what I'm saying. You know, the ordinances that we have, there's nothing that says that business can't operate as a distribution center. Because the township, if our ordinances were clear and cut, a warehouse is a warehouse and a distribution center is a distribution center. If our ordinances were clear, then we would have something to go on. But we don't, and it's existing, and they're permitted to do it, regardless if we make them make the changes to the driveways or keep the 18-foot driveway. They can bring the tractor trailers in there right now, tomorrow. They could do that. You know, there's nothing that we can do or the township can do to say, no, you can't do that.
Fair point. At the same time, we can hold them accountable for any violations that they may exceed, whether it's a ton limit or whether it's an operational hour limit or whether it's a noise limit or a light limit. We can enforce those same restrictions to keep them out of here.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I think the gentleman has made his point, and let's just, if we can respectfully, let's just move on to if there's anyone else that needs to be heard.
There is.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate that. It was a pleasure speaking. Thank you for your time and patience. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr.
Ms. Smilik is in the audience with her hand raised.
Yeah, Eileen, yeah, but this could go on for all night.
I know.
And
Right now, the only other person who has their hand up is Penny, who has already spoken.
Yeah.
So if you want to say that Tina Smilik is the last one, that's up to you. You're the chairman.
Okay, the next one is the last one. But yeah, but the thing about it is, I don't want to cut the public off. I'd rather come back at another meeting and finish the public. So if there's any more.
Let's take Tina's questions or comments, Mr. Chair, and then we'll see where we end up at the end of the night.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Tina, would you raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you give this evening can be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And we see your name is Tina Smilik and your address?
33 Charles Street, Howell, New Jersey.
Go ahead.
I wasn't going to speak until the chairman's just started to rant. And I really have a problem with the whole thing where you think we don't have anything. What it sounds like you're saying is our master plan subcommittee has let us down because our ordinances aren't covering what we need to cover to protect our properties and our biggest investments that we are going to make. And if we can't protect our investments, if our zoning boards and our planning boards and our master plan subcommittee, our council cannot protect us, there's something obviously wrong here.
I mean, I have to interject. I'm sorry.
Please.
This has nothing to do with the master plan subcommittee. This
He said it had to do with the ordinance.
Excuse me, respectfully. This use exists on the site today. The zoning does not go lot by lot, as I know you know, to determine whether or not every use within a particular zone is conforming. That's why there is a zoning board. This use exists. I think what the chairman was trying to get across was there has been a number of comments saying we're introducing, if the board acts favorably, we're introducing distribution to the area, and that's not true. The use is there. If the board denies the application, and I'm not opining one way or the other on what they're going to do, the use doesn't go away. It stays because it's there and it's allowed to remain.
But it's at a smaller.
I understand that, but I think that that's what the chairman was trying to get across.
Okay,
I don't think that the generalization that the master plan subcommittee and the zoning board and the planning board are letting us down, and that's not an accurate statement.
Well, then let's
zoning is what it is.
If we don't have the right definition for warehouse, if we don't have the right
definition,
definition,
not what this application is about.
But that's what the chairman just said.
No, it's not what he said. What he said is the use exists, whether we approve or deny the application, they approve or deny the application. The use is not going away. That's what he's saying. And this, I mean, I get that it's late and we're all kind of getting a little punchy, but I'm absolutely not going to sit here and allow you to misrepresent what he has said. That is not the case.
Okay, I'll go back and look at the video once it's posted.
That's great. I look forward to
so, but this is not the same. This is a smaller piece of property, and now we're expanding it into a bigger piece. And I can see how these people want to be respected for what is the most important piece of property they're going to have. You know what? There's a lot more on there, and it seems like we don't have any answers because we're not going to know answers until the site plan. So we're going to approve something now and hope that when the site plan comes out, then make the changes. Is that how that works?
Mr. Pate?
Because we don't have the drainage, we don't have the definite in the drainage, right? Because that plan isn't, we just have a guesstimate of what they're going to do. And when they do the site plan, then that will. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify for that. So the stormwater management report is an actual engineered stormwater management report in accordance with the current stormwater management regulations. It's not hypothetical, without any information. It's a stormwater management report. It's almost of the exact scale of detail that would be required if this was a site plan submission to the board. And I wouldn't, for the board's protection, I wouldn't let this be coming before the board without something of that substance. So,
and the planning board wouldn't have let West Farms go without any substance, but we said we need a traffic study. We didn't need a traffic light. And now here it is. We, the residents, are paying for a traffic light on West Farms and Fort Plains. You had the movie theater that went up over on
I'm out. This isn't related.
This is not an opportunity to reiterate what has transpired over the past decade.
I'm just saying a lot
We're
of things.
focused on this application. This is questions and comments on this application only.
Please. I don't want to relitigate anything else in the township.
Okay.
This application.
For going in, are they past, when these trucks pull out in and out, when they do the ingress and egress, do they go over the line?
I have no idea what you're asking, but Mr. Pate,
Do the tractor trucks stay in their own lane when they pull in and out? Or do they have to go into the other lane in order to move in and out of this, get in and out of the facility?
Mr. Ray, are you comfortable with it, with a short answer on that one?
I am, and they stay in their lane. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, because it's very hard to see all those reports, and it didn't look like it in the report. Okay, I don't think there's enough circumstantial evidence on here to vote, but you know what? That's what you guys are here for. So I hope you make the right decision and you understand what the residents were saying.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Eileen?
We have Monica Bayes.
Okay. We got this, we got to cut it. We got to cut it. You know, it's 10:41. You know.
Hello.
Raise your right hand, please. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And your name and your address, please.
Rajni Monica Bass, 10 Michelle Boulevard, Howell, New Jersey.
Okay, ma'am, you've heard what the chairman said, and
Yes.
you've heard the comments of the professionals, and there's been a lot of testimony from residents and everything. The only thing I would ask as the board attorney is, if it's possible, please don't be repetitive. I think many of your neighbors have made some important points that they wanted to make. So if you could keep that in mind, please proceed.
I do.
Okay, thanks.
One question that I have, I understand that the use is already there. That's been made very, very clear. My question is, though, in reality, when you have a small warehouse and the use is there, when you multiply it 2.5 times the size, what do you think is going to happen 180 feet behind my house? Already, I have water drainage issues. The dry well that's been put by the town in my yard is collecting water all the time. The backyard is flooded all the time. Has anyone come back here to walk to see the water issues? No. And now you're talking about 3 retention basins. We already have one in the neighborhood. I have one across the street. Has anyone been concerned that the road has already flooded once? And now you're talking about an impervious structure that we can't even put in pools in our backyard because we're told that you can't have more than 15% of our area with an impervious structure because of the water issues. So what is going to happen? Has anyone looked at that water table and telling me that those 3 retention basins are really going to work when the 2 retention basins we have in our development do not work?
That question has been asked and answered, and
it was not, sir.
Yes,
it was not. No, it
Charlie,
wasn't. There was no
Charlie,
answer for it.
Charlie, would you please answer that again for the last time?
So, like I said, they have a design, stormwater management design. It's not just, hypothetical information on a piece of paper. They have done test pits throughout the site to confirm seasonal high water table, separation from seasonal high water table for a stormwater management basin. Their site, as far as their impervious coverage, it is all encapsulated on their site and captured by their stormwater management basins of the 3 that are proposed. In fact, along the north side of their property, all their proposed grading drains from the northerly and the westerly side of their limits of disturbance into their basins. So there's no stormwater runoff from their site that's going to be flowing onto neighboring properties. It goes into their basins, has to comply with the stormwater management regulations that are in place in the town and also at the DEP level. It's not only going to be reviewed from and has been reviewed by me as the board's professional, but it's also going to have to pass the snuff of DEP because they do need regulatory permits from DEP because they are in a riparian buffer, the outer 150. So Like I said, this isn't just a hypothetical, here's a footprint on a plan. They have a design, stormwater management, and it's been reviewed by my office and will also be reviewed by DEP.
But no offense to you, sir, these 2 retention basins here were also reviewed by your office, and you also had to come and correct what was happening in my backyard because of the ineffectiveness of the retention basins. So I don't, honestly, I don't believe that with the amount, none of you have come here to see the actual water. And when the engineers did come and look at our yard and they saw how much water was here and in the back and the drainage issues, they were saying that it was a mistake to have the retention basins the way that they were, that there wasn't adequate drainage. So honestly, I don't really believe in that. I'm a physician. I've worked on township committees before. My father is an engineer. He's come out here and looked at it also. And he's worked on wetlands. He was chairman of the planning board. This right now, the way that it's structured, he's looked at the plans. And honestly, I'm just going to say, in all due respect, it's a disaster in the making. That road across the street, Ramtown Greenville, will be flooded. That bridge cannot maintain the traffic and the water flow that's going to be occurring. So I suggest you take another look at it. The other thing that I have a question about is that, yes, we all mentioned the lighting, but nobody has honestly addressed how much lighting. I don't see a picture or anything about how much lighting is going on those buildings. As it is, I have the one light, it's shining in my bedroom window like a full moon every single night. So don't tell me that this lighting on a new 30,000 square foot building is not going to be changed, and it's not going to be more than that. So I really, honestly, I want an answer right now, Mr. Pape. If you want to give me an answer, I want to know exactly how much lighting is on that building and how much is going to be shining into my backyard.
The building lighting is not designed. The building lighting is a part of the site plan. The commitment that was made is that we would abide by the ordinance, that there would be no light spillage. So any existing lighting that is spillage would have to be removed, and all of the light fixtures that would be installed would have to meet the ordinance's standard. And those are the commitments that were made to this board, and the applicant remains committed to those.
So then am I to believe that there's going to be absolutely no lighting on the side where that driveway turnaround is?
There'll be no spillage of lighting from this property onto any of the adjacent properties. That is the ordinance standard.
Okay, so then there's gonna, how is that possible that there's no lighting spillage? How are you gonna prevent that?
The engineers have a lot of techniques, primarily using LED lights with what are called backside shields. And all of the lighting is placed on poles that are a certain height. All of that is reviewed by Mr. Cunliffe during the site plan portion of the application. But it's the township's current ordinance that lighting cannot spill onto adjacent properties. That was not.
But I see it happen all the time. All lighting is spilling over. The school across the street, the lighting is spilling over. So how is that? I'm just asking an honest question. You can't tell me that ordinance, when I'm looking at a school across the street, the lighting is coming through my front window.
I can't speak for anything other than the applications that we're presenting to the board.
But you're talking about an ordinance. So I'm telling you right now that is not being followed. So I'm asking you, how are you definitely going to guarantee that?
Listen, as far as schools and everything, they don't follow through the township ordinances. Schools, we have very little control over schools. And I'm sure.
Do you have control over anything, honestly?
Okay.
I'm really getting very disappointed. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to insult you, but I'm really starting to get very disappointed at how things are being run. I already see how this is going. And I honestly don't really think that you're taking us into consideration and the intelligent questions that are being asked. You keep saying, going back to the same thing about how it's already in existence, that we're not changing anything. Honestly, just not out of disrespect, but looking at it, you're looking at a structure that's already in existence. I don't have a problem with that structure back there, but I do have a problem
with you saying that just because it's already in use like that, building an extension on that structure that's 180 feet from my house. It's not 180 feet from your house. It's 180 feet from my house. I'm a physician. I'm a first responder. I sat here and I bought this property only because I was told that that was wildlife and DEP protected, that what was existing there would not be changed. I asked the township, I was told by numerous people. That's the only reason I brought this property. And now to see this going up or potentially, I don't have a problem with business. I don't have a problem with, you know, everyone having their American dream. But you know what? I'm on call, and you know, you made him out to be an not you, but Mr. Pape made him out to be such an altruistic guy serving, you know, and I don't have any problem with that. But I also sit here and serve the public. And I sit there on call at night, and I come home and I would like to be resting during the day. But no, now I'm going to have 180 feet from my bedroom window. I'm going to have trucks going back and forth. I'm going to have refrigeration noise. You're not here. I am. So out of respect, I'm asking you just to all take into consideration, not just, oh, well, it's not changing what's already there. It is.
Okay.
And that's all, that's the comment that I have to say, nothing further.
Okay. Okay. Eileen?
No one else in the audience with their hand up.
Okay. Can I have a motion to close public?
The chairman,
Yes, sir.
make a motion to close the public.
Motion?
He's silent.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Saya, seconded by Mr. Cantor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. Mr. Pape?
Yes, Mr. Chair. It is a late hour.
Yes.
It's a board that has been working for the past 4 hours, and you're a board without all of your members. May I ask that we have a transcript made of tonight's hearing through our court reporter? We'll deliver it to you promptly. I would ask that we be granted a period, it'd be asked that we be granted an opportunity to do a summation and conduct a vote at the next available meeting.
Okay. Eileen?
Hold on one second.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Mr. Saya.
one thing. So the existing structure has no stormwater management whatsoever,
Exactly.
right? That whole piece of property has no stormwater management whatsoever. And what Charlie's telling us is that if we make improvements, we could manage the entire site, get out of the sensitive areas, let the clean water, the fresh water be fresh water, and can totally contain what's there. And now I'm hearing, you know, the spillage of water on, you know, on residents because we have no stormwater management to begin with. And that bothers me a little bit. So Charlie, I'm just throwing that out there.
Mr. Pape, how long will it take for your stenographer to prepare a transcript so we can ask Eileen to check dates?
Angela, I'm going to ask you to measure it in weeks and hold up the number of fingers. Angela, this is very fast. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. We need to.
Can I give Angela some dates and she could shake her head if she can have it done by then?
Angela, can you do it in 2 weeks? So 2 weeks from now, we can deliver a completed transcript, Ms. Urbano, Mr. Chairman.
Well, our next meeting is 2 weeks. It's July 12th.
You'd want to go out to at least to the end of July, right, Ken?
I need a little bit more.
Okay.
I
July,
need to digest this to prepare my remarks. Yes.
okay, July 26th.
July 26th,
Otherwise, you're up to August 9th.
July 26th, Ms. Urbano will take it. Could we be listed at the top of the agenda so that we could be completed by, it's going to be a summation and a vote. Could we be
Yes,
listed? At the top of
that
the
would be perfect.
Eileen, I will not be available July 26th.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm looking for the board to be completely gathered. So
hold on one second.
what's the first meeting in August?
August 9th.
Is that okay, Mr. Pate?
Or, Ms. Urbano, do I have any applications on that night?
On August 9th, no.
Okay, then
And actually, Mr. Hughes, who is also not here tonight, is also not available on July 26th. So August 9th would probably be a better night.
but because I do not need to poll all of the applicants' professionals, they'll be in the audience, but not part of the public hearing. August 9th works for me. And if it works for the board, I will take it. For summation and voting.
Okay, Mr. Pate, thank you. Okay, any other business before the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
are we going to be opening up a second time? Mr. Tropoli?
No,
We're done.
no, public is closed. Summation and vote.
Roger.
Okay, is there any other business before the board?
Can you just carry that for the public, just so that they know, please? No, I don't.
Okay, case number BA 20-107-366 Ramtown Greenfield Road LLC will be carried to August 9th at 7 p.m. Now, this will be a in-person meeting, correct?
No, it will be Zoom. In-person does not start till September.
Okay, I'm just asking.
Okay, Zoom.
Okay,
Same
at
format as
7
tonight.
o'clock on Zoom, this will be summation and zoning board vote. Okay,
Perfect, thank you.
thank you.
I have no further business.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Mertens.
Okay.
Thank you guys for sticking around. I appreciate it, everybody. Who seconded that?
I did.
Second,
Mr. Saya.
yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you guys for sticking
Thank
around.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Tropoli, Charlie, Jen, Sherry, Mr. Mertens, Cantor, Mr. Roscoe, Mr. Saya, and our court reporter, Angela. Thank you very much.
All right.
When is the next meeting?
July 12th
July 12th. Okay.
on Zoom.
Oh, tired.
Thank you.
See you next meeting.
Good night. Have a happy 4th, everyone.
Have a
Yeah.
good evening, everyone. Same to you.